Chapter 47-49. In the end, a severe beating was prevented by Jian Wushuang, and did not fall on Ding Beichen's head. Brother Jian, don't worry, in a year, I will definitely build a real sword that fits perfectly with you, Ding Beichen said with shame. It's just that those luck will be. Jian Wushuang did not scold him, patting him on the shoulder lightly. Don't put too much pressure on it, even if it's gone. The sword is not suitable for me nowadays. You will give me my sword in the future. Although he said so, he still had reluctance and frustration in his heart. Only one person soared from the divine power universe to this ultimate Daanhuan, and the only tarot Excalibur became his sustenance. The familiar luck now dissipated, and the last half-handled Tai Luo Excalibur shattered into fly ash. Ding Beichen nodded heavily. Rest assured, Jianxiong, I Ding Beichen never say anything. Even if the two of us never see each other again, I will definitely send the sword to your hands. Okay, I'm waiting for that day. Jian Wushuang smiled. Brother Jian, I can feel that you and my master have very different swordsmanship, and I look forward to seeing your sword discussion one day. Ding Beichen said, that is definitely a stunning battle. Jian Wushuang heard something, and also came to have some interest, whether from the mouth of the little emperor or Ding Beichen. He heard the mysterious master too many times. When he was about to ask, a wave of supreme coercion appeared quietly behind them. Jian Wushuang and Xiao Dijuan looked back at the same time, and they saw Yu Bo, who looked cold, staring at them. Yu Bo, listen to me. Under the listening typhoon, the two figures firmly tied to the pillar by the Yanli rope, all of them had a look on their faces. In a blink of an eye, Jian Tian was tied back to the listening typhoon again. In order to prevent the two from escaping again, Yanli rope almost didn't tie their heads. I said, Yu Bo, the confinement is not so strict. We haven't done anything in Heaven Realm that hurts the truth. Xiao Dijuan said helplessly. But no matter how he spoke, Yu Bo was like a rock and did not make any sound. Yu Bo, don't shut us up like this. It's better to shut us up in the Tiandao bookstore and read more books. Yu Bo slowly opened his eyes, then waved his hands to loosen the Yanli rope between them. Only go to the bookstore of Heavenly Taoism. If I find that you are going to another place, you will be confined for another 10 years. Zai Audijin raised his eyebrows and pulled Jian Wushuang out of Tingfeng Pavilion again. I can tell you, don't take me to some messy places anymore. In the vast clouds of immortality, Jian Wushuang was dissatisfied. He smiled with his head turned around and said, relax, I won't take you to messy places this time. The Tiandao Book Pavilion is located in the center of the listening typhoon. Except for the emperor and some elders, it is not open to any Yinxian and fairy in Tianjia. However, after flying in the fairy cloud for half a day, Jian Wushuang saw a towering pavilion located in the light wheel. Nearly 20 overlapping light wheels slowly rotate to surround the pavilion in the middle, which looks sacred and mysterious. The feet fell on the ground, and the little book boys who cleaned the square saw each other after they saw them. There are very few people coming and going in this bookstore, and there are countless volumes in it. The dodgy Tibetan exercises are all in it. The little emperor pushed open the dusty bookcase while explaining. Jian Wushuang heard the words, and his heart was already moving. If it was as he said, maybe he could find some clues in the Tiandao Shuj. Even just learning about some of Dian Huan's situation is much better than turning around like a headless fly. Pushing the door in, the wooden ladder with the first order spiraling upward appeared in Jian Wushuang's eyes. Although the 10-year confinement was only a flash, but it can be revoked in advance, the news made the two a lot easier. Uncle Yu stood outside the door of Tiandao Shuj and silently waited for the two of them. After leaving the Heavenly Taoist Pavilion and leaving the listening typhoon, Jian Wushuang and Xiao Dijuan eventually returned to the Heaven Realm and Heaven Court. This feast of heaven has already come to an end, and all the elders with light wheels have successively left heaven. Yener, don't you really plan to stay by my side? Asked Jin Wuyang, who was sitting on the throne and carrying the godless power. The little emperor shook his head directly. I am still in charge of the 6th heaven realm, and the Black Mountain crystals cannot be cut off. It is really helpless to stay by the emperor. But, Zhen Wuyang stopped talking and finally let Xiao Dijuan leave. Looking at his leaving figure, the deepness of Zhen Wuyang's eyes deepened again. Walking out of the heavenly court, the inexplicable pressure on Jian Wushuang's body has disappeared, unspeakable comfort and transparency. At the same time, Chen Qing, Chuanxiu and others who had been waiting for a long time greeted them. I thought you two were really going to be imprisoned for 10 years, but now they are released after only 2 years, causing me to worry about nothing. Chen Qingmei flirted. Little Emperor shook his head helplessly, then turned to look at Jian Wushuang Road. Brother Sword and wait for me for a while at the entrance of the celestial realm. I will go to the Emperor to say the last goodbye. Jian Wushuang nodded, and then followed Chen Qingqi to the entrance of Chen Qingqiao towards the boundary of heaven. Their figure gradually disappeared, and Xiao Dijuan and slender Xiaopao glanced at each other, and then both returned to the heavens. As the elders of all parties and Yan Xian successively left, the whole heaven was silent again. However, in order to leave a good impression in front of Zhen Wuyang, all the emperors were the latest to leave. At this moment, the little emperor who changed into a luxurious suit, accompanied by a thin purple robe, made a departure in front of the heavenly court. As he departed, another emperor wearing a white suit of teeth walked out of the heavenly court. It was the ordinary 5 emperors and Sun Mo. I have been hit by 50 suns, and I feel pain in my back even after a few years naturally. The hatred of the little emperor is also added to the bone. At this moment, seeing the little emperor's back, he wished to rush up and give a kick. But his own reason constrained his behavior. Just as Moz tried to teach him something, a white jade-sized object fell from the waist of the little emperor to the ground. Immediately afterwards, the white jade object rolled to the feet of Gongzi Mo. What is this? The sun gnaws the remaining bone. Young Master Mo was puzzled and kicked the slap-sized, cracked white jade bone. Then he stooped to pick up the quirky bone. My partner, do you know what this thing is? The white-robed Yanxian next to Gongzi Mo shook his head. I don't know, but if you want to come to Gongzi Yan, you can never carry a useless object with you. This is probably a very important thing for him. Chapter 4751. Gongzi Maoan said. A curved line was raised at the corner of his mouth. This idiot even has the habit of throwing up and down, falling into my hands. You never want to take it back. Looking at the little emperor who was unknowingly missing something, and gradually drifting away, Gongzi Mo and the white-robed Yan Xian beside him all sneered. In the place where he could not see, Xiao Dijuan's mouth slightly raised. After going out of the heavenly court, and sitting on the imperial court, he looked back at the heavenly court above the heaven of the 9 sides. Maybe in the next Chinese year, everything will change dramatically. As the leader of the battle for the peach in the realm, in addition to the fairy peach as a reward, the Emperor Zimyang waved his hand again and gave dozens of Car Supreme treasures. Fortunately, on this round trip, there was no interception, and he returned safely. Returning to Xiaogyushan, Jian Wushuang began to investigate the 2 pieces of sky-shaped bone armor and consolidate the fairy style that he realized. The practice above the Yin Xian in the Great Yanhuan is difficult and illusory. Today's Jian Wushuang, holding 2 strong ancestral skills, 2 styles of Xinghe Lake and the sword, and the newly acquired fairy style mountain and river, and the true shadow of the 3 emperors in the bowl of the bottle. Whether it is the bottom card or the bottom line, it is enough for him to gain a foothold in Dayanhuan. He is confident that even facing the Dayan immortals who bear the light wheel, even if they are not enemies, there will never be a move. In the following years, the fairy style was reconsolidated. The more Jian Wushuang felt from the depths, the more scary the stone beads became. You know, this fairy style is a little mountain and river, but it is only a very small galaxy among the countless galaxies in the stone beads. If all were developed, what would it be like? Also, where would this stone be able to stay in the mind of the giant sea sky chapter? All kinds of mysteries are like chaos, firmly entangled with Jian Wushuang, making him very confused, but also growing rapidly unconsciously. While he was studying the sky-shaped bone armor, the little emperor happily visited, carrying the treasure bestowed by the Emperor Wu Wuzhen. At this time, it is already 5 years later. Brother Jian, after a few years, The breath has calmed down a lot," he said with a smile. Jian Wushuang looked away from the bone armor in his hand and looked at him. "How come? Chen Qing is not with you." Little Emperor shook his head slightly. "There are some problems in the Black Mountain in the next 3 days. I asked him to investigate." Hearing Jian Shan in the next 3 days, Jian Wushuang's brows were slightly frowned. Obviously there was resistance to it. Feeling the displeasure flashed in his eyes, Xiaodajin reached out and patted Wushuang's shoulder on the sword, sincerely said, "It's really not what I want to trap those prisoners. You also see my situation. Stone. In exchange for a large number of treasures to cultivate the forces. I am afraid that I have already disappeared in the killing time after time. I assure you that as soon as I break through the Dian Immortal and the Emperor's fortune, he will immediately give them a free body." Jian Wushuang no longer speaks. He still stays here. On the one hand, he made an oath with the little emperor. On the other hand, he believed that the time is far from mature. The clue will be more difficult, taking one side of the heaven and the heaven as the foundation, and then exploring. It will be more convenient and easier. Little Emperor also consciously did not continue this topic, but looked at the 2 bone armor on the case. "Brother Jian, how are you looking? Did you get the answer you want?" He pointed to bone armor. Jian Wushuang shook his head. "How can it be so easy? I'm afraid it won't be until the moment of gathering before you can see through." "Is these things important to you?" Xiao Dijuan asked the question again. Jian Wushuangdo said, "Before I figure it out, this thing is not much value to me, but I do need them." The little emperor nodded, then lowered his voice slightly. "Since this thing is of some use to Brother Xiong, then I will say it. In fact, this thing is not only seen in the Heavenly Taoist Pavilion. I had seen this bone armor and jade ornament in one person. Now I think it should be what you need." Jian Wushuang heard the words and moved his heart. "Where?" "The 5th Emperor, the son of Ink." The little emperor looked at him and said softly, "Master Ink." The name is recounted again in my heart, and Jian Wushuang asked, "If he really has it, can I exchange it for something?" The little emperor heard the words and shook his head. "He is the most arrogant and violent member of the 7 sons under my emperor's seat. In the early years he enjoyed the city of slaughter. Convergence. I'm afraid that the way of bartering won't work with him at all." Jian Wushuang also frowned slightly, and his son Mo, who left him with a very bad impression in the battle for the peach. After Mo got Xiantao, he broke his faith and attacked Zizi Qian out of the game. Moreover, his shot is quite fierce, even if his appearance is quite ordinary. But he is probably the leader among the 7 emperors in terms of his scheming and control of the realm. Judging by Xiaodijin's overview of Gongzi Mo, combined with his previous knowledge in the heavens, this Gongzi Mo is obviously a strong and cunning guy. There is still a way to take that bone armor. Xiaodijin's voice was steady, and he looked at Jian Wushuang. Jian Wushuang did not speak, and he hesitated in his heart. According to the previous impression, if you want to get the sky-shaped bone armor in the hand of your son, I am afraid that you really have to take this route. Are you sure that Master Mo really has a bone armor in his hand? Okay, if I lied, I would meet up by then. Jian Wushuang's gaze passed through the temple door and looked at the misty sky outside Xiaogushan. A sky-shaped bone armor is too tempting to him. The reason why he cut off the mud tires and flew to Daanhuan by himself alone. He has a strong intuition. They are in Daanhuan. The only clue, although illusory, is never broken. Slowly spitting out a long breath, he whispered, "Young Master Mo, where are you?" "North Celestial State." Xiaodijin replied. "Brother Jian has already made up his mind? No matter what the result is, you have to embark on this one." "It is good." Outside Xiaogushan, the wind screamed, and the 3 figures stood in a zigzag shape. A young man in the forefront dropped a ranger black shirt and put on a warm and jade-like dress. Chapter 4752. In the transformation of time and time, Jian Wushuang, which was relatively ordinary in appearance, has now become handsome and elegant, and a unique scent of dust is flowing around the body. The ink-colored hair strands bound behind him are sublimated from time to time to produce a pale golden pattern, which is quite the meaning of a dust fairy. Behind him stood two tall statures like gods. Chen Qing is quite like a swordsman. His height of more than 1 foot is full of oppression. Even the slightly thin spring and autumn are close to 9 feet. The three of them stood together. But the incomprehensible violation had a little meaning. After careful entrustment, the little emperor watched the three of them leave. "Ma'am, you said, what am I doing right?" "Nothing is wrong, Your Highness, only success or failure." Between the heavens dotted with countless stars, the three bodies flow arbitrarily. This is the first time that Jian Wushuang has been so arbitrary since he came to Dayanhuan. The stars above the head step on the flow of clouds, unspeakable and comfortable. The expansive and vast heavens of one side flow slowly under them, and the strange luck between the heavens is like an eggshell, full and mysterious. One celestial domain contains dozens of continental plains, and each of the continental plains is responsible for countless vitality. However, these are only one of the most obscure celestial domains in Oasis. Although he rushed to the northern celestial state, where Gongzi Mo was located, he was followed by Chen Qing. This should have been a boring and killing journey, and it was quite interesting unconsciously. The wind and snow, the world is bold. The different planes of the heavens in one side appear in their eyes in turn. There are 9-headed dragons that are unmatched in the realm of Yanxian, and the super heavens that are entrenched. The rare gems contained in them can't be counted. There is also a terrible background, a prosperous ancestor across 3 or 4 heavens. Of course, there are more sparse creatures and few celestial fields. Chen Qing seems to be very familiar with these celestial routes. In the constant rush, he can always reach some sparse, yet extremely interesting celestial planes. Naturally, when rushing across the sky, the least people can do are those who like to hijack. Even if they are born out of nowhere and achieve the status of Yanxian, these people who like to make money are indispensable. Everything brings a lot of fun to the boring journey. How about, hasn't this experience of life rushed for many years? On the vast yellow sand ground, 3 bodies sit on the backs of the dragon horse-like beasts, walking forward. The sky above the head fell down in heavy snow and fell on everyone's shoulder, provoking large and small pieces of snowflakes on one shoulder. Jian Wushuang did not deliberately evaporate with his strength. In his opinion, it is also a more meaningful thing to feel the natural birth and death of all things. "Brother Chen Qing, do you often travel between these heavens?" Jian Wushuang asked. Chen Qing, who was sitting on the back of the beast, said with a smile, "It's also a shame to speak. When I hadn't met the little emperor before, I was just a kid. In the beginning, relying on the youth and vigorousness, pushing the heavens horizontally, it caused a lot of enemies, and finally had to flee desperately. In this way, after 2 visits, I was able to get acquainted with more than half of the entire heaven. For example, in the northern celestial state we are about to go to, my original son Mo, who had nowhere to go, didn't want to even enter the heavens. So he suffered a severe beating and almost destroyed my foundation." Speaking of which, Chen Qing is still smiling, but from the slightly trembling voice, Jian Wushuang still feels that his intentions are difficult. "So I went to Bai Shengxianzu this time. One is to help the Sword Brothers to find what you want, and the other is to calculate the ledger with the sun. That year, when the beating was beaten, I want to take back the profit." Looking at Yi Qingping's Chen Qing, Jian Wushuang sighed in his heart. This time, the journey to Baitian-Xianzhou, I was afraid that it was completely uneven. Just as the 3 of them laid back and prepared to leave the sky except for the sand, sea and snow, the ground not far away suddenly picked up a bulge. Immediately after the separation of sand and stone, a sloppy 3-inch pocket old man came out. Jian Wushuang looked at each other, and then all looked forward. After seeing the 3 men, the sloppy old man who had drilled out of the ground, with a look of joy, rushed over with short legs. "You distinguished guests, and the little old man are polite." Responding to him was a long knife straight out of Chunkiest hands. The long knife broke, but it hung over the head of the sloppy old man, and did not cut it off. Rao was so shocked that he sat on his knees, and even said nothing. "Speak, what are you waiting for us here?" Chen Qing looked at him with interest. The sloppy old man heard the sound, and swallowed his throat hard. "Master, Little old man is not malicious, just want to use the map in exchange for some rare treasures. And then suddenly appeared and alarmed the three adults. Hearing this, Chen Qing looked at Jian Wushuang. Jian Wushuang did not speak, but looked at the sloppy old man carefully. It is his realm that has no more than half an ancestor level, and has not yet entered the strength. And the 3-foot-high figure, the skin exposed outside the clothing, presents a texture like a quicksand. It should be a goblin that steals the luck in this plane of heaven, and there is not much threat. Thinking of this, Jian Wushuang lowered his vigilance and said slowly, "What map?" Seeing the murderous intent in the eyes of the three men retreating, the sloppy old man breathed out in the bottom of his heart, and then whispered, "I saw the three adults' extraordinary strength around their bodies. Apparently they were traveling in the heavens of Yanxian. A roll of maps picked up earlier was handed over to adults in exchange for some rare treasures. As for the map, the little old man couldn't recognize it," he said, and then took out a roll of some broken notes from the sloppy shirt. Seeing Jian Wushuang, looked at Chuanxiu. Spring and autumn, with their hearts in mind, directly waved a bag containing thousands of Montenegrin crystals to the sloppy old man. He didn't pay anything in return. He unconsciously opened the bag, and the black mountain crystals were full of eyes. With a thump, the sloppy old man sat down on the ground. You should know that the most common piece of Montenegro crystal is enough for the top repairers, who haven't entered into it for more than a few months. It is a treasure in the entire division. Chapter 4753. These specifications of the top mountain of Montenegro. Even if you look at the big division, it will definitely become a resource for Yanxian to compete for. However, Jian Wushuang had no idea about this, because before he left, Xiao Dijuan gave him more than 10 rings, and each of the crystals of these specifications in the ring had already burst. As for these Neji rings stuffed with top crystals, they were all thrown to Chuanxiu for safekeeping by Jian Wushuang. Judging roughly by the spring and autumn period, the top crystals stored in the 10 nawas are the endless mining of Montenegro, with a full year of production. This is why Chuanxiu is so generous. Ignoring the shock of the sloppy old man, Jian Wushuang reached out and ingested the severely damaged note. Starting with a unique texture, and accompanied by a weak diffusivity, made him a little puzzled that the reading map seemed to be written on some kind of unique skin. With a wave of his hand, he wiped out the faint diffusive seal on it, and a picture of infinitely vertical and horizontal came into sight. The pattern on the scroll is extremely complex and looks magnificent. It can be seen vaguely that the crisscross pattern is beyond the scope of the heavens. It seems that it is no exaggeration to describe the vastness of the universe. And this map seems to have suffered some kind of destruction. Apart from being able to see the rough outline, most of the subtleties are already undetectable. Obviously, it is a mindless and tasteless. Fuck, this old kid is fooling people. Chen Qing slapped his thigh and looked at the sloppy old man with an angry face. But where can he find his half-body shape in the wild? This old boy dared to lie to my grandfather Chen. I have to dig the ground 3 feet, and I will also give him a bone. Chen Qing rolled up his sleeve angrily, and the situation would stir up Huang Sha. Jian Wushuang reached out to stop him. Although this map seems useless at present, it may come in handy in the future. As for those crystal stones, it should be given to him. Chen Qing was indignant, but he also knew that their primary goal was to go to the northern celestial state, so he put away his anger and went on. However, before leaving this plane, Chen Qing still left a Yanli doppelganger, just waiting for the sloppy old man to appear again, whipping him well. After this episode, the three of Jian Wushuang went on without stopping. Sitting on the back of a beast without any sense of bumps, Jian Wushuang pulled out the map note again, carefully looking through it. On the scroll of the cortex, all the territories are ups and downs, and they are all painted with some kind of dark red paint, which is unspeakable and mysterious. However, since there is no name displayed on the map notes, it is natural that no name can be seen. Jian Wushuang simply didn't study it anymore, and put the map notes directly into the bowl of the bottle. Out of this piece of heaven, and after running for several months, at the strong request of Chen Qing, the three stopped in a tiny heaven. It is a tiny sky, but it contains 3 independent playing continents. Chengdi Yanhuan's luck. Even for the monks who have just entered the practice, Shou Yuan has grown to the extreme, and their own realm will also become the Yin-Yin top cultivation with the growth of Shou Yuan. But 99 of these top practitioners stopped here, and the upward immortal realm was cruelly abnormal. Although Jian Wushuang has seen thousands of Yin Xian along the way, it is purely because he has approached the top of the power of one side as soon as he entered this great Yinhuan. If he had randomly landed in a continent in a certain heavenly domain, I am afraid that it would take me tens of thousands of years to reach this stage. At the same time, after looking at the thousands of continents in Jianyu, Jian Wushuang seems to have no mortal claims. Even the most prudent trafficker can practice derivation skillfully, and Shou Yuan also grows accordingly. Stepping on this extremely thin land continent with diffractive power distribution, the bustling streets will also come into view. The number of monks can be directly determined by the strength of yin, and the monks in this mainland plain are very sparse. Occasionally, people who see the practice are just ordinary monks. Alcohol addiction has been committed again. Sword brothers, Chuanxiu brothers, let's go to a clean place for a drink and rest. Chen Qing scratched his head and walked across the street with a height of more than 1 foot, which attracted attention from others. Jian Wushuang nodded, and then the 3 entered a relatively secluded restaurant on the street. Without the responsibility of the wine boy Xiao Er, the 3 of them directly picked up a secluded place by the window and sat down. Chen Qing then patted the table. Well, let's drink. There are very few diners in the whole restaurant. Only there are so few tables and diners in the corners. Come shout. A tall man dressed in a gray coat with a white par around his waist came out of the back compartment, his face full of flesh. Chen Qing heard that he immediately remembered to smash him with 2 slaps, but then he was stopped by Jian Wushuang. Go to Santon Wine, try to be as fast as possible. Jian Wushuang said softly. Then Chun Chun threw out a piece of the top mountain of Montenegro. Remember, you need good wine. The tall man caught it subconsciously, his eyes gleaming greedily. Okay, no problem. I want whatever wine I want. After that, the tall man stumbled into the back compartment. His mother, a non-influential fish, will dare to be bold and exogenous. Today is not the brother of the sword. You stop, I will definitely smash his brain. Chen Qing said angrily. Jian Wushuang looked at the street outside the window and said lightly, "One more thing is worse than one less. They are not the owners of this restaurant." Chen Qing was stunned, and soon felt the meaning of what he said. It didn't take long for the tall man in nondescript clothes to trot in the arms of 2 big altars, and there were 3 or 4 other men behind him. A total of more than 10 altars, and small dishes were placed in front of the 3 of Jian Wushuang. A few VIPs opened their mouths enough. The strong man grinned and opened the altar cover carefully before leaving. Chen Qing had no doubt about him, and he shot the body directly, and the crystal-clear wine line fell into the 3-person bowl. With only one glance, Jian Wushuang couldn't help laughing. Chuanxiu also reluctantly laughed. This group of stupid things actually mixed medicine powder into the wine. It's up to him. Since the last time I drank in the heavenly feast, I haven't had a sip. Today we are going to drink 1,000 altars. Snoring. Chapter 4754. Except for the big guys like Juhai Tianzhong, who have transcended the concept of Yin Xian, they can manipulate Yang Xian's mind, but it is still limited. At present, this diffusive force is thin, and everything that enters the celestial domain of Yan Dingxiu is the phoenix hairy scales. For Jian Wushuang, they are all like ants, so naturally don't worry. How about the 4th son? Did they drink? Drink and drink, already drinking 3 altars. That's good. After that, we will send another 20 altars in the past, and directly turn them over. These brothers and sisters of the family, who are not eye-opening. But after all, why is this medicine so poor? Shirten has no medicine yet. I will increase it later. Across the layer of yarn barriers, several rickets were discussing in a low voice with no barriers. Naturally, all these extremely small voices fell into the ears of Jian Wushuang. It was another whole jar of wine. Chen Qing twisted a peanut from the plate with his hand. Brother Jian, Have you enjoyed drinking? Put down the bowl, Jian Wushuang nodded. Subsequently, Chen Qing tapped the table with her fingers. Primary to check out. I'm coming. Dozens of fierce-looking men ran out of the back compartment, all with sharp knives behind them. With just one glance, Chen Qing raised his eyebrows and smiled, and the peanut twisted in his hand flicked past. Wrapped with strong peanuts, it cut through the space and passed through. Wow! The leading tall man could not even find out the sharp knife behind him in the future, but he only felt an unbearable pain in his belly. Looking down subconsciously, he saw that a transparent hole the size of his head had been opened in his belly. Together with the dozen or so men behind him, they all stood still and looked at the vast hole in disbelief. A bunch of obnoxious things. No longer glancing at them, Chen Qing waved his hand to release Yin Li and crushed them directly into the powder. The restaurant was completely silent. Jian Wushuang, who was sitting in the same place, twisted a peanut and flew towards the ceiling. At once, a whole ceiling with 6 floors was collapsed. Chuanxiu quickly released Yanli to protect the 3. Immediately after, a few screams rang out, and then returned to Xinjing. A moment later, in the lobby of a restaurant with the rubble, a black man lying dead was lying on his back. On the other side of the black body, a woman who was by 5 flowers and had tears in her eyes, looked at the 3 men of Jian Wushuang in horror. Due to the scraping of the gravel, there were a few more blood marks on her soft cheeks. A little weak. Looking at this scene, Chen Qing couldn't sit still anymore, and got up and kicked the black man who passed out to death. Girl, are you okay? Chen Qing said softly with a wave of her hand to untie the rope on her body. The woman moved subconsciously. It's okay. You were tied here by them? No, I am the shopkeeper of this restaurant. A little greeting, Jian Wushuang and Chen Xiu silently looked at Chen Qing, this guy's tongue, Chan Lianhua, and removed the inner defense of this delicate dispenser. 3 distinguished guests. This is a master brew made by the dispensers in return for your life-saving grace. The real restaurant shower put a binaural jade pot on the end and refilled the 3 of Jian Wushuang. The liquid crystal of the wine falls into the glass and emits a light fragrance. Chen Qing's index finger moved, and he drank directly from the cup. At the end, his eyes lit up. Good wine, slightly sweet at the entrance and a little sour top grade. After finishing the grooming and coming out of the back compartment, the soft woman heard the words, and her face could not help but flushed with a flush of redness. Xiao Er, who was standing by, heard his words and immediately raised his thumb. Adult tasting time is first rate. This superb wine is made by my own shopkeeper. It is made by my own hands. It is made by chewing rice and naturally fermented. Absolutely. The air condensed. Jian Wushuang silently retracted the palm that touched the cup. The spring and autumn, which had already drunk half a sip, turned green in place. Chen Qing's mouth twitched, and her eyelids jumped involuntarily. You mean this wine is chewing wine? Yes, Juku is the chew of my shopkeeper. Although this shopkeeper's face is soft, making wine with chewing koji is unheard of. For a time Jian Wushuang secretly relieved in his heart, thinking that he does not have a quick mouth. Otherwise he will have a shadow on the wine. Perhaps it was due to the unnatural appearance of several people, and the feminine woman poked her lips forward to remove the hip flask. Chen Qing hurriedly stopped her. What's wrong? I know you dislike it. The soft woman pursed her lips. It should be different customs, I don't dislike it. Then, Chen Qing directly recaptured the jug and drank it into the spout. The soft woman looked redder, and turned, and ran into the back compartment. Both Jian Wushuang and Chuanxiu swallowed their throats unconsciously, feeling Chen Qing's strength in his heart. Good wine. After drinking a pot, Chen Qing wiped his lips, and then took out a slap-sized exquisite wine jug directly from his arms, and threw it to Xiao Er. Give me full. It doesn't matter whether you chew or not, mainly because someone likes drinking. Chen Qing, who was lying on the wide back of the beast again, took a sip of wine. Traveling outside the heavens, Chuanxiu chuckled and said, Brother Chen, I was going to leave like this. I saw the shopkeeper just now, and I am sad to see your eyes. Chen Qing slowly opened her eyes and closed her eyes again. She is immortal, I am Yin Xian. There is no result at all. it is better to do nothing. For Chen Qing's words, Jian Wushuang agrees. Although the luck of carrying out the research is extremely great, even for ordinary people who can't practice, Shou Yuan is more than 500 years old. But for Yangxian's numerology, that broke the shackles the near-infinite Shou Yuan, perhaps it is a Taoism with hundreds of millions of units. All the previous obstacles will be turned into the past. It is better not to contaminate these causes and effects. Sitting on the back of the heavenly beast, Jian Wushuang's eyes watched the Star River turn, and he couldn't help but evoke the deepest memory deep inside him. As long as the divine power universe was interrupted, and he was coming to Daanhuan, he made a decision. This decision is known only to the Nine Tribulation King, and was executed by the Nine Tribulation King himself. After Jian Wushuang completely left the divine universe, the Nine-Robed King, who entered the ancestor level, used the road to reason, and sealed up one side of the realm, together with the heir of Jian Wushuang in that side. Even if he resolutely cut off the past, but he was ultimately selfish. This is a stupid decision, he did not dare to face the consequences. Chapter 4755. Moreover, when Jian Wushuang was about to leave the divine power universe, he left his Yinxian Qian for 1 point, and merged and forcibly elevated the Qian in the divine power universe, making the Nine Tribulation King and Daoyan into the ancestral class. He didn't know whether he had done everything right, and what irreversible consequences would happen if he made a mistake. Thinking of this, Jian Wushuang rubbed his brow. Chen Qing, who was walking side by side with him, murmured quietly at this time, "Maybe I might change something." The circulation of the heavens, the vast territory controlled by Zhen Wuyang, is extremely vast. After traveling for more than a few years, Jian Wushuang and his entourage finally came to the North Heavenly State. The so-called North Celestial State is located in the northern part of the Desai region. It is very magnificent. Even from a distance, it looks like a small heaven. The Yanli is rich in clouds, and the fairy cranes fly together with Yin Shao, and Ruiguang Cave shoots the rest of the sky. A towering heavenly gate sits in the sky, mysterious. The 3 figures headed by Jian Wushuang went straight into the cloud. There are several Yinxian guarding the Tianmen, which are much more severe than the 6 emperor realms of the Little Emperor. In order to avoid detours, the 3 of Jian Wushuang entered directly from Tianmen. At the same time, to prevent being recognized, Jian Wushuang took out the black gold mask from Chuanxiu and pressed it on his face, suddenly turned into a vicissitudes of middle-aged man. Chuanxiu and Chen Qing also transformed their faces and overwhelmed their ancestors. As a result, the 3 seemed to be in the realm, without any achievements, and entered the North Heavenly State without any difficulty. The Yinxian guarding the Tianmen didn't make trouble and check, but just laughed a few words, and then let them in. The clouds are separated, and the magnificent North Taiangxianzu, like a fairyland, is fully reflected in the eyes of Jian Wushuang. "Brother Sword, let's just go straight in this way. I'm afraid it will attract the attention of the Son of Ink," Chen Qing said, looking at the entire northern celestial state. Jian Wushuang said, "Hurry first. We haven't figured out where the Sun Mo is. Let's explore here and make plans. We can only do this." So far, 3 middle-aged men, who were not ancestors, fell into the North Celestial State. In the prosperous world, there are endless layers of top repairs, even if the immortals riding the cranes are everywhere. The Ruiguang projected by the big sun above the head put everything in sight to a layer of fairy rhyme. To avoid attracting attention, the 3 simply walked into this heavenly city, looking for a method that might be close to Gongxiemo. Look. Take a look, the top-level black mountain-top crystals are all produced in the 6-day realm. Just in the most central position of one of these heavenly cities, an abrupt selling call attracted Jian Wushuang's attention. He followed the voice and saw that on the way along the street, one side of the pavilion filled with black crystals caught his eyes. A scruffy Taoist in gray robes is selling, and the roof repairs that are gathered in front of the paving are already more and more. Jian Wushuang frowned slightly, and raised some strange feelings in his heart for no reason. I really didn't think that in this northern Taiangxianzu, there is the circulation of the black mountain crystals. Wasn't it originally heard that Gongzi Mo had already circulated still? When will it be allowed again? Chen Qing said thoughtfully, touching his chin. Jian Wushuang did not speak, and slowly stepped forward, probing the movement before the paving. The sloppy Taoists saw that the flow of people was gradually converging, but those who advocated were even more struggling. Everyone takes a closer look. It is fully exploited to the six-day realm, and is the top-level Black Mountain top crystal. The mass production is terribly low, and there are rumors that the Black Mountain in the six-day realm has been exhausted. This top crystal is used one piece less. Looking at the slab-shaped dark black irregular crystal, Jian Wushuang confirmed that the sloppy Taoists did not cheat, and each piece was a real top crystal of the Black Mountain. An ancestor-level top repairer moved his heart and asked, "How is the price of a piece?" When the sloppy Taoist saw the price inquirer, he smiled and said, "Today's walk, a piece of Montenegro top crystal. You only need to have one copy of the exercises, no limit to any exercises." The wait and sees of more than 100 famous practitioners were all stunned, and then they all scrambled to throw out a copy of this exercise method, in exchange for a piece of Black Mountain top crystal. Seeing such a trading scene, Jian Wushuang frowned slightly. You should know that this Black Mountain Dingjing has great use even in Yinxian realm, and the value of each piece is naturally extremely high. But right now those half-ancestors who haven't even reached the level of yen can only get one piece with a non-influential exercise. And how can one not be puzzled? And looking at the appearance that the scruffy Taoist refused, the sword Wushuang vaguely felt that he was no longer trading in equal amounts, but was generally completing a certain task. The scene was a bit chaotic for a moment. Jian Wushuang saw that several Yinxian were involved in the transaction, but it was only half the time of the incense sticks. This pavilion filled with the top crystals of Montenegro was empty. Jian Wushuang, who was watching from afar, saw that with the rapid departure of all the top repairs, the smile on the face of the scruffy Taoist disappeared, and an impatient look was replaced. He directly rolled nearly 100 exercises in the spread, and then flicked those exercises into the sleeves of his robe. After doing all this, he quickly walked into the air and left. "Brother Sword, have you noticed something is wrong?" Chen Qing on the side asked in a low voice. Jian Wushuang said nothing. "Follow him and see what he plans to do." Chen Qing and Chuanqiu nodded at the same time, and then the three figures quickly followed. But he didn't keep up with it for a long time, and the sloppy Taoist breath disappeared without a trace, and no one like Jian Wushuang could find it. At the same time, there was a loud hawking, which came out from another heavenly city Jian Wushuang. Even if it was decided that the three people would be dispersed, as much as possible to explore how many hawkings in this northern celestial state paving of spar in Montenegro. With the soles of the feet on the ground, a youth-like ancestor-level repairer has already opened the paving and started selling. This time the Montenegrin crystals on the paving are lower in grade, but the most common Montenegrin crystals, the number of which exceeds 100. However, even the most common Montenegrin crystal was quickly robbed. After watching this scene, when Jian Wushuang was about to set off to catch up with the young man, Chen Qing and Chen Qiu also rushed back from the rest of the city. "Brother Sword, they are really strange. Every city has at least one street vendor selling Black Mountain crystals," Chen Qingning said. Jian Wushuang didn't open his mouth. Combining with Chen Qing's previous doubts, he had already discovered that these vendors selling Black Mountain crystals seemed to be carrying out some kind of secret and relatively easy to detect momentum. Chapter 4756. It can represent the Black Mountain crystal, and it is inseparable from this thing. The Yinxian of the entire real Wuyang seat under the sky, and even the Dingxiu, know that there is only one person's iota Genzizi yen. At present, in this northern celestial state, there are several paving places selling Black Mountain crystals, which seems to be doing some subconscious momentum. Jian Wushuang has been consciously aware of the undercurrent of the calm lake. This time, I'm afraid our whereabouts will be more secret. Let's stay close to Gongxiamo first, Jian Wushuang whispered. Chuanqiu glanced at the young monk who was packing away. "Is there something happening?" He shook his head, and then said, "The current situation is unknown. Follow him first to find out. Chen Qing and Chuanxiu nodded. At this time, the young monk had already packed it up, but instead of leaving, he carried his hands and toured with great interest in this heavenly city. The three of Jian Wushuang also kept a certain distance and explored his whereabouts. The young monk, with a floral bag on his shoulders, dressed in a decent gown, seemed to travel a long distance and came to Xianzhou to experience the pilgrimage. Jian Wushuang was 100 meters behind the young monk, watching his every move with his consciousness. But this situation did not last long. Soon, with hundreds of cranes coming suddenly, the mighty flying over the sky from the top of the head, disturbed Jian Wushuang's eyes. After the immortal crane soared away, there was still a half-shadow of the young monk in front. The heart said badly. Jian Wushuang looked behind him. Chen Qing and Chuanxiu grasped each other's heart, and each of them walked towards different rushes. The disappearance of this young monk's body means that the clues are interrupted. In this sensitive season, Jian Wushuang will never allow a half spread. The three figures were traced in different directions. The soaring roof repairs gradually became sparse, and the spring and autumn rushed forward along a street. At the same time, the pavilions on both sides of the road began to blur. The anxious spring and autumn, completely unaware of the changes that occurred around him. When he suddenly burst into a crisis, it was too late. A broken flower-wide cloth suddenly strangled between the neck of spring and autumn from behind, and then an irresistible momentum came. Suddenly hit by this, he was so dark that he almost passed out, even if he wanted to move his finger. And the figure holding the floral broadbuller to hold the neck of spring and autumn is the young monk who disappeared before. At this moment, he only has a sharp killer in his eyes, an unprecedented huge force of coercion, which can never be controlled by the ancestral top repair. One hand controls spring and autumn, the other carries the palm of the general trend and points like a knife, without hesitation to his origin. However, at this time the change is steep. Laugh! The sound of gold and iron clashes resounded, and the enchantment laid by the young monk shattered, and a little cold light came. The young monk was aware of this scene, and the palm that was originally intended for the origin of the spring and autumn changed suddenly, and the momentum of the force was directly blasted forward. The two collided, sending out an emptying shock that cancelled each other out. A middle-aged figure with a vicissitudes face appeared later, holding an invisible sword and staring at him sharply. The four eyes met, and the murderous opportunity that broke out in the eyes of the young monk soon disappeared. And then suddenly through spring and autumn passed, taking advantage of this empty space to escape directly. Jian Wushuang reached out to catch spring and autumn, gazed forward, and did not catch up. Cough, brother Jian, you saved my life again. Chuanxiu clutched her neck, and her bluish-purple complexion gradually recovered. Just in the short confrontation just now, Jian Wushuang judged that the other party's strength was absolutely impossible, and it could never be the ancestral realm seen before. If the young monk is determined to fight, I am afraid that he will also be hit hard. At this time, Chen Qing also came and saw this scene and quickly asked, "How did you catch that guy?" Jian Wushuang shook his head. "I'm afraid we will have some changes this time. Can they be the eagles under the sun's ink seat?" Chen Qing frowned. "If the eagle dog under the ink master is okay, he is afraid he is not." Jian Wushuang said slowly. Chen Qing reminded, "Brother Sword, let's get out of here first. It wouldn't be great if we bumped into Master Mo's men." Jian Wushuang nodded. At the moment, they are already at the top of a fairy mountain far away from the Sky City. The young monk seemed to have a certain kind of magical power. When the scenes in the eyes of spring and autumn were already blurred, he was actually lured out of Tiancheng. If it were not for Jian Wushuang to feel that his breath was moving away, and to rescue him in time, Chuanxiu would never survive. The three bodies then left without leaving any traces. After Jian Wushuang decided to stay close to Gongziamo, the three of them stayed in a heavenly city in the northern celestial state. Brother Sword, otherwise during this time, we will first find out where in the Xianzhou your son is. At that time, you won't be unprepared if you hit him directly. In a Xianfu pavilion, Jian Wushuang, who was sitting against the window, was quietly listening to Chen Qing's lonely complaint. At the end he said lightly, "Let's wait a while, let's not go to the town to kill my son. If we have a choice, try not to fight. That being said, I am afraid that I will enter the palace of Gongziemo, and I have no choice." Chen Qing sighed. Chuanxiu clutched his neck and said, "No matter what, you must be careful. I also feel that we are not quite flat this time." The three of them were talking. The ground quietly rolled up a dust of dust, and then the 7 bodies were dressed in caskets, wearing Dujia's figure, and stepped into the Xianfu pavilion in turn. Jian Wushuang's gaze also locked these visitors for a moment. Looking through Doli, he saw that these 7 old customers were dressed in Middle Ages. All of them were middle-aged, with indifferent dull eyes in their eyes, as if everything outside was not related to them. After entering the Xianfu pavilion, the 7 old guests did not stay much, but walked to the top-floor compartment to rest. Don't say that these undressed hats are dressed in style, and they have a sense of independence in the past. Chen Qing looked at the back of the old customers and analyzed. Jian Wushuang did not speak, his eyes were already attracted. He saw that the old guests in the clothes under the clothes all had a kind of secret aura of extreme sharpness. That kind of unique sharpness, only Jian Wushuang can perceive it keenly. All good swordsmen interesting. An old guest headed. It seems that all induction, very secretly cast a glance in his direction. The 4 eyes are opposite. Only for a moment, the old customer withdraws his gaze, and then all the 7 figures disappear into the compartment. Chapter 4757. These old customers who hide the breath of kendo give Jian Wushuang a very strange feeling. But he didn't think much about it. After all, it is possible to live in this magnificent North Celestial state, even if there is a sword fairy. After a brief discussion, the 3 of them went back to the room to rest. At Chen Qing's strong request, the 3 men were squeezed into a box. Jian Wushuang, who turned over and sat on the window sill, shook his head helplessly. He gradually found that when he was with Chen Qing, he was more and more like the one who started in the end of the world and wandered through the world. The bad habits of eating, drinking and sleeping should be quit in time. After taking a swig of beauty, after the so-called chu wine, Chen Qingkai lay on the bed and began to sleep. Spring and autumn, just after the interception that had no backhand at all, he practiced even more desperately. At the moment, except for the extremely powerful 8-armed wrath in his hands, he has no magical powers. Even in the face of an ordinary Yanxian, he will fall into great passiveness. Ascending to Yanxian realm is an urgent matter. Otherwise, he will never be able to catch up with Jian Wushuang. For ordinary Dingxiu, the achievement of Yanxian realm may be an illusory imagination, but spring and autumn are different. The blood of the former emperor flows on his body. Even if the emperor's luck brought to the extreme, it is enough to let him step into it. Yanxian realm. The whole Xianfu pavilion was very quiet, and even with the Sky City, it seemed to have fallen into silence. Among the immense clouds of Xianyan, the big day that brought Ruiguang to the entire Xianzhou gradually gathered Guanghua. The night that belongs to the northern celestial state is approaching. Sitting on the windowsill, Jian Wushuang began to sit down. Although he seemed to be sitting enlightened, his 5 senses of supernatural power were still observing around him keenly. As the cloud curtain gradually thickened, just as Jian Wushuang was about to take back his mind and prepare to go deeper into sitting, a subtle voice made him open his eyes again. He was familiar with the sound, the end of the sword. Inexplicably, Jian Wushuang thought of the mysterious 7 musketeers I saw earlier. It seemed to confirm his conjecture, and then several breezes suddenly rose. Jian Wushuang subconsciously looked over his head and saw a total of 7 figures, directly flying into the sky, but disappeared into the cloud completely in an instant. He seemed to have some feelings and quickly awakened Chen Qing and Chuanxiu, and then stepped longitudinally, his figure straight up to Jiu Shao, rising the cloud top, accompanied by the sun and the stars, but alone lacked the breath of the 7 figures just now. "Brother Jian, did you find anything?" Chen Qing and Chuanxiu followed him, standing on the top of the cloud. Jian Wushuang did not speak, but used his consciousness to deduce the shrinking mountains and rivers, and soon looked at the sky dome behind him. The 7 previous figures were weird. Let's keep up with the investigation, he said quickly, and then walked forward. Sure enough, traveling hundreds of thousands of miles, Jian Wushuang probed the breath of the 7 swordsmen from the clouds. With the breath, everything becomes simple. The 3 of them swiftly traveled along the breath of the clouds. Blocks of magnificent heavens were left behind, and these were just the tip of the holy north celestial state. As the way forward, the strength of Yin Yin became more and more pure, and Jian Wushuang began to wonder in his heart. He had a hunch that the place where the 7 swordsmen were going was faintly similar to them. Water dial sees the moon, cloud dial sees the sun. As the breath of the 7 swordsmen suddenly disappeared through the layers of Yanli clouds, a magnificent fairy state came into their eyes. Xianzhou, which exhibits a diamond-shaped base, hangs high in the sky. From every corner, there is a jade belt waterfall, which falls on the sky. And on the side of this Xianzhou, there is another huge green tree, and a golden cage is hung on the top of this giant tree. In the golden cage, a round of red birds carrying a halo. The entire Xianzhou is very bright. Such a magnificent scene, although it is not comparable to the heavenly court where Zhenliang is located. It is no exaggeration to be called a small heavenly court. Here, wouldn't it be the residence of Gongzi Mo, hidden in the clouds? Chen Qing looked at Xianzhou and murmured. Jian Wushuang nodded. Except for Master Zmo, no one would have such energy, and could live in such a fairy state. Chen Qing frowned slightly. If this is really the residence of Master Zmo, I'm afraid he has already made a plot. From the current point of view, this magnificent Xianzhou, whether it is from the layout or the pattern of imprisonment of Jinwu, has a hidden meaning to the standard of heaven. I am afraid that any sighted person can guess it. The ambition behind this Xianzhou master. It seems that I'm going to clear the air for the little emperor. Chen Qing involuntarily tightened the real sword around his waist, and there was already a murderous intention in his eyes. I advise you not to take this idea. Even if the son Mo is again, you can't intervene. Don't forget that his old son is Zhen Wuyang, Jian Wushuang said quietly, and added a sentence at the end, unless absolutely necessary. Chen Qing grinned. Get orders. Mix into it first, then make a plan, Jian Wushuang said. And the back figure was the previous one, and went to the small heavenly court. Immortal rhythm. This Xianzhou portal is worth a lot of Yanxian. However, these Yanxian guards are all sleepy now. 3 ghost-like figures flew into Xianzhou in an instant, only driving the breeze. This dress is so tight. I'm afraid it'll be cracked during the follow-up. On the bluestone-paved avenue, 3 guards in uniform dress walked side by side. The headed sword Wushuang changed its appearance again, from the original downcast middle-aged man to a young heroic guard. Both Chen Qing and Chuanxiu changed into the faces of the guards who had been previously stunned. Chen Qing, who was standing tall, grumbled while carefully guarding the tight guard clothing. Being in this quiet fairyland, Jian Wushuang felt very carefully the sudden situation that might happen around him. Just then a sudden cold drink sounded from behind. Stop. The 3 of them froze in place, and Chen Qing had already put his palm on the hilt of his waist, and just waited until the situation was wrong, and then beheaded. Jian Wushuang turned around slowly, staring at the guards without fear. You are on duty. Why do you want to go to the Temple of 5 Suns now? One of the middle-aged patrolmen asked. Time on duty has passed, and now we are going to the Temple of Wu Gongzi to be on duty, Jian Wushuang replied. Later, the middle-aged patrolman asked a few more questions, and he just answered the questions before leaving several people to leave. Brother Jian, it's really tall. How do you know these problems? I'm blind. Fortunately, I didn't reveal the stuffing, so go ahead. Chapter 4758. This is located in the middle of the north of Xianzhou, a small fairy state, and there are thousands of fairy buildings. The Temple of Heaven where the young sun Mo is located is in this little fairy state. The Jinwu, which controls the light and darkness of the northern celestial state, is kept in a golden cage on the hibiscus tree for the owner of the temple to watch and drive. The ring of thousands of cranes, soaring and resting in the clouds, from time to time turned into a fairy, lying in the clouds, cast curious eyes toward Jian Wushuang and others. After stepping into this little fairy state, Jian Wushuang saw the magnificent temple next to the hibiscus tree at a glance. 3 figures stepped on the bluestone avenue, close to the temple of heaven. The sun is shining, Xianzhou will be night. Soaring forward, Qianglu of thousands of immortals was trampled under his feet, and the magnificent heavenly temple was gradually clear. The sole of the foot fell on the Haomiao square. Jian Wushuang and Chen Qingqiu at the side looked at each other, and then bowed their heads into the temple of heaven. Yu Yin rides on the wind, and there are some immortal music coming out of the temple of heaven. From time to time, there are more than a dozen maids dressed in luosang, holding the silver plate in hand, walking under the jade corridor. In the vast lotus ponds on both sides of the temple of heaven, there are koi boys, lying among the lotus petals, playing in the water boringly. Seeing a few new faces, they all hurriedly moved over to Yunyu. Go, let me go away, uncles are doing business, come back and play with you. Chen Qing waved his arms, constantly driving the koi boys around him. These little guys may be too bored in the lotus pond. Instead of returning after hearing Chen Qing's words, they giggled and all lay on him to interact. In order to prevent multiple incidents, Jian Wushuang and Chuanxiu had to help take these little guys off Chen Qing's body and throw them into the lotus pond one by one. At this moment an ethereal, but with a bit angry voice, suddenly sounded in this temple of heaven. I said, those 3 silly big guys. Do you treat those little guys like that? Do you know that they are all my boys? Jian Wushuang stiffened, and then subconsciously looked at the place where the sound was made. I saw that at the top of the eaves of the temple that day, a figure in a leno skirt looked at him with a smile. 2 of them hanging from the gauze in the air, like a faint moonlight, with a pair of petite jade feet shaking in the air. The silver bell between the ankles gave a very clear sound. The long wind blew, blowing her veil, revealing a look of shock. And then, those koi boys thrown into the lotus pond were all transformed into their original shapes, and floated to the mysterious and beautiful woman's body. The figure immediately stood up, a pair of jade feet stepped on the colorful glaze, and there were koi swimming around the body. Looking at the beautiful scene where immortal qi is about to reach the critical point, Jian Wushuang's eyes are more and more vigilant. He unconsciously reached out his hand and touched his waist, but he was surprised that his Tailuo Excalibur had been blown up by Ding Beichun in the heaven of the sword. Hey, ask you guys 3 silly big men. Looking away from Xianyun, a pair of Xing looked at the 3, and finally fell on Jian Wushuang's face. Brother Jian, what are we going to do next? We're not going to expose it. Chuanxiu lowered his head anxiously. It's definitely not going to reveal anything. How big a girl's house can make waves? Chen Qing whispered, Brother Jian, in my opinion, ignore her, we rushed in. Jian Wushuang then spoke, and his voice became somewhat complimented. Xianjia, our 3 brothers first entered the temple of heaven on duty, and did not understand the truth. If they annoy Xianjia, please ask Haiyan. The woman standing at the eaves of the temple of heaven heard the words, flew straight down the wind, and fell in front of Jian Wushuang, the whole body surging around. Jian Wushuang opened the distance without trace. It turned out to be the first time on duty, and I said, when you stupid guys appeared in the temple of heaven. A voice of anger came from under the veil. But this is not a reason. You just bullied my boy under the seat, and now I punish you all to jump into the lap of the lotus pond. Chuanxiu and Chen Qing looked at each other, and their faces were awkward. Jian Wushuang replied, I'm afraid it's a bit wrong. When we were on duty for the first time, we put on a wet suit, which would damage our appearance. When the woman gathered, she wanted to say something, but then there was a call. Mother, your son called you. A maid stood in front of the temple of heaven, and respectfully said. The woman who gathered the yarn did not answer, but looked at Jian Wushuang. 3 people. Fortunately, you will be spared this time. After she finished, she ran barefoot to the temple of heaven. Chen Qing was indignant when she went completely away. If it weren't for the sun's sight, I would let the lady know what cruelty is. Jian Wushuang did not speak. He looked around the temple in a circle, and was planning to make the next exploration. The woman who had disappeared quietly showed her figure from under the pillar again. "You still do nothing, I'll come with me," she said quietly, her tone unquestionable. The three looked at each other, and then entered the temple of heaven together. The door of the hall slowly opened, and a warm fragrance came. In the middle of the magnificent temple, a large incense burner spit out clouds of smoke. There are 18 giant columns on both sides of the mountain and sea scrolls. There are 18 seats next to each giant column for the feast. At the same time, there are hundreds of dancers dancing in the clouds, and the extravagant scene of singing and dancing. After stepping barefoot into the giant hall, the woman with the veil directly stepped on the ground flowing clouds, like a fairy growing randomly between heaven and earth, and ran wildly. Jian Wushuang's gaze locked the deepest part of this temple in the first time. There the 5 emperors in extravagant Chinese costumes. The son of Mo is sitting in the first position, drunkenly admiring the dancing postures of the dancers. Yu reading books www.akanshu.com. He didn't consciously get up until he saw the girl with a light fairy deer coming, and was happy. "Silver Bell, you are here." The maids on both sides brought a luxurious dress and fur to her dressing. "Every day is the same old style, and I'm tired of seeing it." The veiled woman named Yinling, wrapped in a white fur, sat on the side of the sun's ink and pouted. Gongzi Mo seemed excited about Yinling's arrival with a little embarrassment. Okay, don't watch, I'll see the competition later." At the end of the conversation, Master Mo turned his head impatiently and waved his hands, and the dancers withdrew. In a moment, there were more than 20 handsome young men with red lips and white teeth, walking slowly up the center of the temple. "Brother Sword, have you ever heard that the sun is good at men?" Looking at the mysterious face of Chen Qing, Jian Wushuang looked at the question mark. Chapter 4759. Chen Qing smiled secretly again. "This is not groundless, but it has long been rumored that the son Mo Yoshi is male, and he once recruited Tianjiao teenagers in the entire big domain and sent them to his northern celestial state. It's cured so you can enjoy the beauty at any time. For example, right now, these handsome young men may be the male pets he maintains." Although Jian Wushuang still has no expression on his face, it is already cold in his heart. Looking at the more than 20 handsome teenagers who came out, there was a touch of imperceptible softness between each eyebrow, which seemed to indirectly corroborate what Chen Qing said. "Whatever he likes has nothing to do with us. Next, we will immediately withdraw after finding the zigzag bone armor. Try not to have disputes." Jian Wushuang whispered. Chen Qing and Chuanxiu both nodded, and then stopped talking. The identity of the 3 of them is the guard of Xianzhou, who came to the Temple of Heaven on duty. Together with their faces, they can be easily transformed into ordinary ones. They are almost impossible to find if they are thrown in the crowd. Therefore, they stood by the giant pillars on both sides of the hall and acted as guards. Originally, Jian Wushuang did not intend to enter the giant hall, but was about to turn around this temple. But in the end, the steps were interrupted by the Silver Bell Mother. Standing on the side of the giant pillar, he turned his gaze to the center of the temple, the handsome young men who were demonstrating sword dance at the moment. The so-called sword dance is more ornamental than practical, although each of them has a stable sword, but lacks decisiveness and resoluteness. It is obviously used for watching. Although all these handsome youths are rare seedlings with swords, Jian Wushuang obviously has no love for love. The most important thing to practice kendo is the innate energy in your heart since childhood, which is the foundation. Ultimately, all things are big, and various Taoist laws are emerging one after another. Although the swordsmanship is special, it does not escape the rules of the avenue. Natural swordsmanship will also come down with the passage of time. These naturally can't have the slightest image of Jian Wushuang's state of mind. Surrounded by a silver bell ringing softly, the drunken son, Mo, smiling at the sword dance performance, seemed extremely satisfied. It's so boring. Yinling, who sat in the top position, was dissatisfied. The son Mo Wenyan drew back his gaze. "What's wrong with Yinling? Dissatisfied?" Yinling pursed her lips. Of course not satisfied. How many times have you seen it again and again? Do you know? And do not change something new. Well, according to you, you can do whatever you say, said Mo Chong the son. Yin Ling drummed his mouth, as if thinking of some new tricks, and then glanced into the hall. Jian Wushuang's heart said badly. His figure didn't even have time to retreat. He heard a slightly excited voice. It's just you, the stupid guy before you went out. Yin Ling got up, her slender hands pointed at him coldly. Jian Wushuang was silent, so he had to walk daringly to the center of the temple. The haze in Gongzi's ink eyes dissipated somewhat. He saw the ordinary guard standing in the middle of the temple, and he always felt a familiar atmosphere. But he didn't think much about it. After all, in the current season, it is the most important thing to be able to win the favor of Yin Ling. After pointing out Jian Wushuang, Yin Ling slowly looked around again, and finally found a young guard who was not too conspicuous in the other side. It's just you two. I can feel that you two are guys with extraordinary skills. It's better to play a martial art here. Yin Ling's mouth twitched a smile. While waving his sleeves, 2 coats with horse training, he pulled out 2 real swords and threw them at the two. Reaching for the real sword, Jian Wushuang's brows were slightly wrinkled. He didn't like this feeling very much, especially the feeling of being criticized by others. If it were not for the moment, I am afraid that Jian Wushuang had already killed Yin Ling. After all his emotions were settled, his eyes turned to the young guard who was also called out. Jian Wushuang didn't see all the emotions in his eyes, as if he didn't remember everything in his heart. Go ahead, please make sure to go all out. If it's not exciting enough, maybe there will be punishment. Yin Ling sat down and smiled. Chen Qing, who was hiding next to the giant pillar, gritted his teeth and said, Damn, if I have to make a last resort, I will kill this woman first. Also count me. Chunki's eyes were cold, as if he was already preparing, and only after Jian Wushuang sent a signal, he immediately started his hands. At this moment, in the entire grand hall, only Jian Wushuang and the young guard stood against each other. Like Yuanzhu Yuezhi, he stood with his sword raised and his breath converged, like a supreme sword intention to be opened by a Tibetan front. In the face of any potential enemy, they keep their best. This is the habit that Jian Wushuang has cultivated in the long journey of cultivation. Even at the moment he did not relax. The young guard standing with the same sword standing in the distance should have belonged to the youth-like clear eyes, and at a certain moment showed a very inconsistent old state. Naturally, this momentary change was also captured by Jian Wushuang. However, without waiting for him to think, the young guard took the lead in violently raising his sword straight down. Sword Wushuang raised the sword to deal with it, and the 2 blades handed over, making a brittle sound. It was just a moment of confrontation, and the thick sword was scattered and frightened. Although it was a fight, it has actually fought 1,000 times in a flash. Jian Wushuang secretly panicked. When can even ordinary Yangtzean swordsman be able to compete with his own rivals? Without thinking at all, the young guard slashed with a sword, and in a very indifferent face, there was a touch of imperceptibility. A sword came out, forcing him to open several positions. Jian Wushuang's eyes were a bit cold. The young guard was hiding under the indifferent expression, and the killer that he tried to control was emerging little by little. At this point, he began to be a little sure that the young guard at the moment could never be the guard of the Northern Celestial State. In other words, this guy at the moment, like the 3 of Jian Wushuang, should have stolen in as an identity. An uncertain idea rose from Jian Wushuang's mind. The 2 real swords collided fiercely again, and the aftermath of the martyrdom produced by the collision point directly wiped out the clouds of smoke in the entire Temple of Heaven. The whole Buddhist strength was pressed against the real sword in his hand, and Jian Wushuang's figure approached the young guard. No matter what your purpose is, it's best not to hit my mind on me. The young guard's figure stunned slightly, a pair of turbid eyes, with a doubtful and scrutiny glance at Jian Wushuang, and then suddenly withdrew more than 10 feet. Chapter 4760. The Temple of Heaven was silent, and everyone looked at this scene with breathless breath. The sword good swordsman, When they saw this almost instantaneous confrontation, were all frowning. Because of the confrontation between the two of them, the sword intentions that escaped from them were absolutely uncommon, especially the sword spirit that flew up in a flash, and even those who approached felt a kind of sensational killing intention of being cut by the soul. Sword stood without a sword, and it didn't seem to plan on the next battle. The young guard did not intend to fight anymore, and after the sword was turned around, he was ready to return. "Stop, did I ask you to go back?" An icy voice sounded, and the youngest son sitting in front of him protruded in front of his body. His drunken eyes were full of coldness. It seemed that the next moment would be a violent murder. The figure that was about to return was also paused at this moment. A pair of British eyes looked at him, and then arched his hand. "Point to the end. If I hit it, I am afraid I will make a joke. If the son insists on watching, why not let me wait for some brothers to compose a sword dance for the sun?" The young man Mo Wenyin looked at the heroic guard who looked down, his face relaxed. "Well, if you are not satisfied with me, it will take your head," the young guard promised, and then turned to look behind him. A total of 6 guards in uniform dress walked out slowly from one side. Jian Wuxia saw this situation. His brow angle jumped slightly, and he stepped back without trace. "Brother Jian, is there something?" Chen Qing asked in a low voice. "If the situation is not right, just run," he whispered, his eyes flashing dignifiedly. At this point, Jian Wuxia was completely certain that the 7 guards were the 7 swordsmen he had seen in the Xianfu Pavilion in the northern celestial state. Right now, they all sneaked into this temple, and the goal seemed to be all running to the sun Mo Qingqiu, and the two heard it, and were all cautious. They knew that Jian Wuxuang's character would never be untargeted. He said that there is a situation, then there must be a situation. For a time, Chen Qing set his sights on the center of the temple, the 7 seemingly ordinary figures. There is not too much nonsense. The 7 figures are spread out side by side in the shape of a character, and then the 7-handed sword with entangled force points straight ahead. The atmosphere in the entire temple began to change subtly. Jian Wuxuang and Chen Qingqiu moved towards the gate of the Temple of Heaven without any trace, but they were stopped by the silver bell girl sitting on the head. At this moment, the sword dance composed of 7 people began. Taking the leading young guard as the guide, the 7-handed sword moved and moved in the hall. The cloud smoke from the huge censer in the center of the temple was also transformed into various scenes by these swords. It may look like a dragon leaping into the sea of clouds, or it might look like a tiger lying on its back, changing a lot. Seeing this magnificent scene, sitting on the side of the temple, or the Yinxian could not help clapping and applauded. The youngest son Mo, who was sitting at the head, nodded frequently, and seemed to be very satisfied with the sword dance of these 7 people. And Jian Wuxuang seemed a little uneasy, because he had just discovered that this 7-member team had a bigger and more powerful force. Although it was only revealed for a moment, Jian Wuxuang was immediately shocked. It is very likely that those levels of Yanli power have transcended Yinxian realm. Are they going to assassinate Gongzi Mo? He seemed to think of something, and then looked at him. Unconsciously, the 7 figures leaned forward. Yunyan gradually spread throughout the hall, making every roof repair seem to be on top of the cloud, fluttering in immortality. At the moment, the son of the sun was gradually excited, and the eyes were even more drunk. In the 7-man formation, the youngest guard in the front, holding a real sword, is very powerful. In the eyes, which were slightly old, quietly showed a sense of more and cold killing. At the next moment, he jumped up suddenly, stepped on the clouds and smoke, and under the gaze of all Ding Xiu and Yin Xian, he shook the real sword tightly and stabbed at the sun. The air seemed to stagnate, and everything that was about to happen happened at this moment. A sword that lingered on the supremacy, without any hesitation to stab him. But at this time, the change suddenly appeared, and the space in front of Gongzi Mo collapsed without a sign, and even changed the position of the sword stabbed with force. The sword that originally pierced the sun's zinc head was forced to move, and finally without any resistance, it pierced the cheekbone and nailed it firmly on the temple chair. The screams rang loudly and blood poured out. The whole left side of Gongzi Mo was directly minced. The real sword penetrated half of his head, and the tip of the sword went straight into the hall chair for more than an inch. But this blow didn't kill him at all, and there was even a distance from the fairy source in his brain. One blow failed to kill. The young guard came down with one of his palms, and vowed to completely kill the Sun Mo. But the ensuing great coercion suppressed his momentum. A black robe came out from behind the Sun Mo, and also stretched out a palm, smashing towards the young guard. The two forces collided, and a burst of loud noise erupted. Then the young guard looked like a kite with a broken thread and flew out. At this moment, all Dingxiu and Yinxian reacted and manipulated Yanli to encircle the 7 people. And the 6 figures standing in place were all moved, and all were like ghosts. After quickly catching the young guard, they let go of their hands and feet to kill. One of them was tall and thin, his palms closed on his chest, and then it was suddenly torn apart. The infinite strength was torn the space directly, together with more than 20 top repairers who gathered around it, all turned into powder. There was another figure, the palm of his hand clenched into a fist, and he hit the ground with a punch. Boom! The entire temple shook, and then a series of fine cracks cracked the white jade floor. The 6 forms of body shape all broke out the most terrifying power at this moment. Everyone has the terrible power to kill Yinxian easily. At this point, the entire temple was in chaos. As early as the first moment of the riot, Jian Wushuang took the lead in responding, directly reaching for the door of the hall, and running directly with the 2 of them. This kind of chaos, which is not controlled at all, is a little careless, and I am afraid that even he will drink on the spot. Brother Sword, this is too exciting. The young man Emo seems to be dying today. Among the 3 bodies that fled quickly in the void, Chen Qing said excitedly, "It is all reincarnation. Someone came to assassinate." Jian Wushuang heard that the body that had fled quickly had stopped suddenly. Looking back at the Temple of Heaven that was about to have signs of collapse, he finally said, "No, I will go back." Chen Qing was surprised for a while, then hurriedly said, "Brother Sword, are you kidding me? Gongzi Mo is already a lifeless man." Chapter 4761. Jian Wushuang gazed at him. "Young Master Mo, he can't die now, and the news of his death pattern is broken. Isn't Lei Zai's bone-shaped armor more important than life?" Chen Qing was also anxious about the kind of breath in the temple. He was more clear than Jian Wushuang. It was because of his clarity that he wanted to prevent Jian Wushuang from dying. Of course, life is not important, Jian Wushuang smiled. But this is the best situation right now. At the end of the speech, he went straight forward, without fear of the chaotic collapse of the temple. "Brother Chen Qing, might I be afraid?" Chuanxiu raised an eyebrow and smiled, and then caught up with Jian Wushuang without hesitation. Who is afraid? This small scene can deter me, Chen Qing anxiously, then clenched his teeth to keep up. In the chaotic temple, the top repair and Yinxian are continually dying. The ground is completely collapsed, and the entire temple is in a shaky state. The 7 bodies are like 7 rocks, and no Yinxian can shake them. A sword penetrated the cheekbones of the face, and the Sun Mo, who was nailed to the temple chair, stopped howling, grasping the blade tightly in his hand, and pulled the entire sword out of his head. At the moment, the ink of the sun, the entire left face was replaced by a huge blood hole, and even one eyeball was broken. As the son of the emperor of the entire Grand Sovereign, he had suffered such a terrible humiliation. "Kill me, kill them, and leave no one behind." The sound of crying blood resounded, and the black robe that had saved his life before bowed his head respectfully. "Yes, 5 sons." Stepping out, Wan Jun's supreme power swayed, letting the already fierce killings stop. The black robe stretched out the old palm, and slowly pulled down the hood, revealing an old face full of folds. "Bring the head on. I will let you die. Otherwise you will have to be humiliated." The ancient voice echoed from the mouth of the black robe. Behind him, there is a dim black light wheel. If Jian Wushuang is here, you will find that this black light wheel is exactly the same as the light wheel behind the elders you saw in the heavenly court. This is a sign of the complete transition from Yinxian to Dainxian. The 7 figures did not seem to be shocked by a Dian fairy. There were 2 figures on the spot. Arms shook, and a light will floated behind. Another 2 great Yinxian. It was originally planned to go forward and try hard to repair in Yinxian. After seeing this scene, all of them consciously took a step back from the battlefield. It's really generous. I say, why you are not afraid. It turns out that you have already made full preparations. The black robe showed in the old-fashioned eyes. And he was not afraid. With me in, you can never hurt the 5 sons. With a cold snork, the young guard who exposed the realm of Dian Immortal took a step forward, his palms coming. A blow completely out of the strength of the immortal. The cover hit the black robe. The black robe resisted and sent shock waves. Under these shock waves, even the giant pillars in the palace were fragmented by the impact. And even Yinxian could not stop. Gongzi Mo was directly flew out. And he was lying on the ground in a state of embarrassment. He watched with only one eye left, as if looking for something. At the first moment of the outbreak of this war, the silver bell snuggling beside him disappeared without a trace, as if there had never appeared. 5 sons, run fast, run fast. The white robe Yinxian, who has been closely following the Sun Mo, appears in time, dragging him and preparing to escape. The sun's ink was unnoticed, and his ugly face was expressionless. You said it was the sun's correction, or the other brothers want to kill me. Don't think about this first, hurry to heaven. Bai Pao Yinxian was also scared by this scene. The assassination of the 2 Dian immortals, such terrible handwriting. I am afraid that this entire division has no power to come up with. But now it has actually appeared. The young man corrects, must be the young man correct. I want him to pay for his life. The youngster Mo burst out loud, his breath rising at an incredible speed. The 2 Dian immortals in the second town and the first one, while watching the Sun Mo still not dead, waved his palms, and the remaining 5 bodies were enlightened, and they ripped open and surrounded. Even the master Sun Mo grasped and realized a fairy style, which had no effect on the situation at hand. When the venomous snake behind exposed its fangs, everything was too late to recover. The white robe Yinxian, who was standing in front of him, even had time to reach out and resist, and the next moment it turned into a powder. The sun was stunned, facing the figure that was about to come around motionless. At this moment, a physique carrying the general trend, moving clouds and riding the wind, rushed into the hall at an unimaginable speed. No one noticed the scene of the 5 figures that surrounded the Sun Ink. At first, a tall, thin figure holding a real sword did not stab at his fairy source in the slightest amount. Abnormal changed the tall, slim figure only felt a heavy kick kicking behind him. And then the whole person flew out. A kick will encircle a gap. And Jian Wushuang picks up his son's ink and moves back without any stay. Seeing the other 4 figures, they all stretched out their hands and held them in the air. Jian Wushuang only felt a tight chest for a while, and the speed of his retreat slowed down for a moment. He didn't think about it. He directly condensed an invisible sword in his right hand and cut off the invisible breath that trapped him. Chasing, the 5 people broke off in unison and rushed towards Jian Wushuang. But with the majestic sword in tension, it surged from behind the sword Wushuang, like the big river and the sea, and pushed directly to those 5 bodies. I said, can you change your goals like me? With the left hand holding the sword and the right hand holding a pair of ear flasks, Chen Qing's free and easy figure was blocked in front of several people. Go away. All 5 physiques pounced on him. Chen Qing broke into a sigh and led the sword to fight. After a moment of breathing, young Master Mo looked at the ordinary guard with heroes in his face, and inexplicably felt a familiar breath. Looking at the undeserved Sun Mo in his hand, Jian Wushuang directly pressed him against a giant pillar with one hand, and then pulled out a dense pattern of bones with sky patterns from his arms. Give me this kind of thing. Why what? Young Master Mo looked at the sword Wushuang, who wasn't a good man, and then looked at the sky-shaped bone armor in his hand, inexplicably familiar. Don't play tricks on me. Give this thing to me. I will spare you a life, otherwise, I will rush to crush your fairy source before they want to kill you. Jian Wushuang's voice was cold and cold. Inexplicably, the sun hit a chill, and his strong desire to live made his memories of the past gradually come to mind. This thing, I also seem to have a piece in my arms. Chapter 4762. Jian Wushuang heard the words, grasping the son's neck with one hand, and the other hand stepped directly into his arms. Under the combined offensive of the 5 mysterious figures, Chun Qing has been unable to persevere for a long time, and has already begun to catch up. In less than 10 breaths, he had to find the sky-shaped bone armor, and escaped from here. But at the next moment, the completely unmovable sun suddenly flashed a bit of tyranny, and the palm behind his back brought out a glimmer of light, and stabbed directly at Jian Wushuang. A strong crisis rushed into his heart. He almost stabbed his head an inch at the same time as the light stabbed. However, it was still too late. The palm glowing in the light left a narrow wound directly in Jian Wushuang's neck, and the blood of the gods spewed out. He was in pain, the palm of his hand was unconscious, and the young man Emo took the opportunity to push it back with another palm, and then quickly escaped. Death! Jian Wushuang was furious, and his neck was recovered at a very fast speed. He smashed his palm forward, and almost blocked all the retreat of Gongzi Mo. However, this established situation has changed again. The son Mo is desperate, pouring all his energy into the left arm, and at the cost of breaking the whole arm, tearing the majestic momentum of Jian Wushuang. Then, Master Mo turned around and looked at him bitterly, his body flickering out of the palace and disappeared. Seeing this situation, how could Jian Wushuang let him go? And even if Chun Qing was struggling to resist, Chun Qiu and the two heard it and chased them out. Lao Tzu, I won't play with you anymore. Chun Qing's forehead and blue muscles are very fragile, and the figure that was almost hung up and barely separated. The 5 figures are very clear in goal, and there is no plan to fight with him again. Then he swept directly outside the hall. The whole temple was irreparably collapsed. In the sudden battle, a group of top practitioners in Yinxian, who had originally been to the Banquet Heaven Temple, had already suffered more than half of their deaths and injuries, and the rest survived. They had already escaped from the Temple of Heaven. At this point, only 3 Dayan immortals were left in the whole crumbling temple. Under the 2 towns in one, the Black Robe is embarrassed. The 2 Dayan immortals shot him down, making it difficult for him to get out of it, and even the immortal body vaguely reached the edge of collapse. Although he slept in the Temple of Heaven for a long time, the Black Robe is very clear. Except for the 99 people under the seat of the Emperor of the True Wuyang, the rest of the Dayan immortal in the vast territory is absolutely not more than one hand. The so-called Dayan immortal is a mysterious existence that completely transcends the immortal immortality. Only when you reach the realm of Dayan immortal can you have such a chance to touch the Emperor's luck. This shows that the scarcity and terrible degree of Dayan immortal. But right now, there are 2 Dayan immortals to intercept the Master Ink. What a big deal. Looking at the vast territory, who can have such a means of heaven? He couldn't imagine it, and even thought it was the will of Zhen Wuyang. Who are you seated in? But did you know that the killing of the son Mo was the enemy of the true Wuyang Emperor, and the entire big domain? The Black Robe was still holding the last fluke under hard resistance, trying to let them know the serious consequences. However, the 2 Dayan immortals who met with him ignored it, and did not care about the so-called Xinwang Emperor in his mouth, and the entire Daisai. The terrible force has already crushed and shattered the heaven above this little fairy, and countless ruins fell to Xianzhou, a school of destruction. And the son of Ben, who escaped from the Temple of Heaven, was like a dog at the moment, dragging a broken arm and fleeing desperately. Over the entire Xiaoxianzhu, the Red Prairie Field, and the extremely dark clouds under the hands of Dianxian, vaguely showed signs of collapse. Jian Wushuang followed, and the narrow and long wound between his necks had healed completely, leaving no scars. What is happening now is far beyond his expectations. He didn't expect that there would be other people coming to intercept his son. And looking at this posture, it seems that it came from a complete extermination. Jian Wushuang does not care about his life and death, but the impact or consequences after this incident will be huge. As the 5th son of Xinwang's emperor, if he falls, I am afraid that all the top repairs in Yanxian in this war will be thoroughly investigated. The three of them are also very likely to be involved. Therefore, Master Mo cannot die. Even if it is dead, they cannot die in their hands. Find the sky-shaped bone armor, and then escape silently, which is the best solution for the moment. After Chen Qing and Chen Qiu were in charge, the mastermind who led the incident was isolated, and 5 of the 7 swordsmen were isolated. Right now, only Jian Wushuang is chasing Gongzi Mo in the clouds. The vast clouds and the real life and death terror made him burst out of his final potential. Even Jian Wushuang, who pursued with all his strength, was faintly struggling, and was pulled away for a short distance. The sun broke through the clouds and fled towards the center of the entire Xiaoxianzhu. There is a celestial hibiscus tree based on Xianzhou. The canopy of the canopy is composed of huge dark green branches, without a leaf. And above the crown of the sky hibiscus, a huge golden cage was hung. The golden cage is entrenched in a big day that cannot be looked directly at. At this moment, the young man Mo Nikang's body had already run to the hibiscus tree. "Yiqing, rescue me!" A loud and frightened voice resounded from the mouth of Master Zmo, who was already the end of a strong crossbow, and placed all hope in his voice. And in the golden cage of the hibiscus tree, the dazzling round of the sun moved. The head of the bird with the golden light will slowly lift it up. This is a Jinwu with 4 purposes. As its bird's head lifted, the polar night was dispelled, and the 2 pairs of red eyes were like 4 big suns, and Yao Yao could not look directly. Well, the cry that is about to tear the territory is going to be heard the whole night in the northern celestial state was dispelled, and the light came. The golden cage was opened, and it spread its wings and flew out. With its wings and feathers unfolding, the glorious momentum shone to the fairyland. A total of 9 red-purple long ling, with the Jinwu wings spread out to form a giant sun, from its tail down, with a magnificent momentum. At this moment, even Jian Wushuang lifted his hands subconsciously to cover his eyes, and could not take a step forward. It's too hot. A burning sensation from the depths of the god's soul made even Yanxian retreat. The transversal trend emanating from the Jiuling Jinwu can no longer be measured by Yanxian. With such a breath, Jian Wushuang vaguely felt that it was about to reach a certain mysterious realm, and reached another level. In his current cognition, this kind of breath has been infinitely close to the top existence in the heavenly court. Chapter 4763. Under the Zemyang seat, there are 99 Dian immortals who are beyond the realm of immortality. This is what Jian Wushuang knows after attending the Feast of Heaven. He knows very little about the realm of Dian immortal. He only knows that it is almost impossible for ordinary Yanxian to achieve Dian immortal, even if it is like Chen Qing. I don't know how long it has been trapped in that step. In the early days of Jian Wushuang's transportation of the Montenegrin crystals during the Great Sale, the wild fox Zen and the whirling ancestor I met were probably the closest to Dianxian. Finally, when they were about to be promoted, Jian Wushuang carried the power of the emperor broke in his fairy source. Right now, the Jiuling Zhenwu with the general trend has the trend of the great Yanxian in this situation. Jian Wushuang's mouth could not help but show a bit of bitterness. The level of Dian immortal is not something he can contend with. It is just a breath of escape that poses a big threat. However, despite the matter, Jian Wushuang didn't want to return it. He didn't want everything he had done before to be wasted. Just wait for the wrong situation, and then withdraw. Seeing Jian Wu's stretched figure, Master Mo seemed to have caught the last life-saving straw, and ran straight to it. But at the next moment, the change is steep. The majestic momentum of tearing the heavenly dome in total is like 2 scares, smashing towards the sun's ink, apparently running away, but the predictable situation did not appear. Those 2 general trends did not fall on the body of Master Zmo, and as soon as they flew, they were shattered by the Jian Wu's wings. The aftermath scatters the quartet. Although he escaped the deadly robbery, he is so weak that he can't even bear the aftermath, and he vomits a lot of blood. At the same time, 2 figures appeared quietly. Jian Wushuang's pupil shrank slightly, and the 2 figures were the 2 great Yanxian, who had just shot in the Temple of Heaven, he backed away slowly, ready to escape at any time. The battle at the level of Dian Immortal, the control of Yin force, is not at the same level as Yin Xian. The gap between the two is even greater than the gap between mortal and Yin Xian. So what Jian Wushuang thinks at the moment is not how to spend time among the Dian Immortals, but thinking about retreating. Jin Wu's bird head with red golden light will glanced at the two Dian Immortals, before looking at the undecided Sun Mo under him. It's clear, quickly kill them all, leave no one. Young Master Mo breathed heavily, and the big hole pierced by the real sword on his face had been restored, and it was weirdly pale. At the same time, Jin Wu's 4 eyes flashed a bit of disgust at the same time, and then he said to him in the back, "I said, you dare to call me my name again, I will burn you into scum." Gongzi Mo shrieked, seemed not to doubt the authenticity of his words at all. "Ming, understand, Zun Zun, do me a favor and wipe out all those who are going to kill me." Jin Wu, who is well known for the facts, glanced at the two Dian Immortals again, and then looked at him with a smile. "You have attracted such a powerful interception, the Son of Ink. Your skills have grown a lot." Gongzi Maoen's face changed slightly. "In short, you can solve the problem as soon as possible. I want them to live alone." A flash of laughter flashed in Di Qing's eyes, and the giant wings suddenly shook. "Whether they can live or not depends on my mood, not on your decision." The giant wing covering the sky spreads out for thousands of miles, and the chirping sound emptied. Jian Wushuang only felt that the eardrum was about to be torn. He didn't hesitate anymore, and was about to escape directly. The momentum displayed by Jin Wu was beyond his imagination, not to mention the two Dian Immortals. Just as Jian Wushuang was preparing to leave the back foot, a long sword with a sense of sensation reached his back. "Don't leave if you don't want to die." A cold voice followed. Jian Wushuang looked back, and saw that it was the young guard who had previously competed with him in the Temple of Heaven. At the same time, Chen Qing and Chuanxia were brought over by 4 figures. "Brother Sword, be ashamed." Chen Qing sighed with some bruises on his face, apparently suffered a lot before. Jian Wushuang looked at the young guard behind him, and said in a deep voice, "This is a matter between you. We will leave now, and do not participate in the fight." "Don't talk nonsense. Do you think you can still withdraw from the whole body now?" the young guard said coldly. Seeing leaving hopeless, Jian Wushuang prepared to take a break. The most intense battle broke out in the clouds. A total of 2 glorious generals evacuated the clouds, and collided with naughty Qingsheng, to burst into the most violent martyrdom. Even the hibiscus tree was shaken, and the whole body of the young Sun Mo lay dormant in the crown of the hibiscus tree, which was already a frightened bird. And in the first time when this battle broke out, I Ching got rid of the gold and black form, and turned into a figure. As the unreal wings with gold streaks fluttered, the two Dian Immortals could not get a step forward. Di Qing Na Yinggu looked at the 2 men with a bit of unruly evil spirit in his eyes. "Now I wait for the original path to retreat. I will not pursue it. If I wait still, I will let you die." Hearing this, the 2 tall, thin and big Yin Xian, who carried the black light, didn't have any expressions, and they seemed completely disappointed. Their goals are extremely clear, and it is absolutely impossible to return to them, just because of the 2 sentences of the meaning. Immediately afterwards, the 2 Dian Immortals worked together again. Twisting the clouds and the coming side covered the palm of the sky, smashing towards the Qing. Qing Yuran was not afraid, and raised her palms with a grin in his eyes to deal with it. At the next moment, Di Qing's seemingly flirtatious palm was actually resisting the advent of the heavenly palm. A red on surrounded the palm of the hand, and covered the entire palm of the sky with the singularity in a flash. It was only a brief moment, which was completely burned by Chimeng by the joint efforts of 2 great Yin Xian. And he didn't even stay for half a breath. Town! The 2 rumblings were resounding, and the supreme power quietly condensed into a dark giant tripod, once again smashing towards the Qing. The phantom red gold wings fluttered behind him, and I saw that every ray of red-ons turned into a light golden black. A total of tens of thousands of Jinwu formed a large group, and bravely attacked. Boom! The impact of the 2 is constantly being consumed, and the turbid black force and the red gold force are raging in the clouds. And finally the clouds can't bear and start to break. As the smashed inky giant tripod continued to dim, it was even more meaningful to laugh in the clear eyes standing in the void. At the same time, there are 9 red purplish long ling, growing from between his hair tips. He grabbed one of the long lings with his hand and pointed the lingering point at one of the great Yinxian, and said lightly, "Since you insist on not leaving, stay here all. I will let you know even if it is Dian immortal. It is difficult for me to have a battle in front of me." Chapter 4764. A black and black treasure covered the sky, and the sun quietly emerged behind Di Qing's eyes, and the eyes of the big day cast a black flame. At this moment, even several swordsmen, who used a real sword to hold Jian Wushuang, and others retreated. "Enjoy it, everyone, and then you will feel the anger coming here." I Ching opened his arms slowly, and the magnificent Huayu began to appear from under his arms. The two were obviously Dian immortalized face, and there was still no expression on their faces. But from their solemn eyes, Di Qing's words were true. Black Wu Baoxiang, screaming in the sky, the energetic force in the entire Xiaoxiansu gathered towards him. With an unimaginable trend, the pressure fell down. Wisps of black inflammation condensed on the black Wu Bao phase, and it suddenly opened its mouth to cry, lowering the amount of black inflammation. Jian Wushuang and other people really saw that even if the black inflammation that came down was stained with a ray, even if it didn't die, it would have to fade away. Immediately, the young swordsman holding Jian Wushuang directly dragged him back quickly. "Unlimited." Di Qingqing smiled coldly. The two Dian immortals joined forces once again, and an inky giant tripod, larger than before, stopped in front of him and smashed forward. The innumerable fire that Black Wu Tsongming dropped, like a rain curtain, was carefully poured in every inch of space. Oh, the shocking black inflammation, even the diffusive force of the sky, swallowed up, collided with the black giant tripod, and burst into a detailed sizzling sound. The tremendous power made the retreating people feel the unspeakable chest tightness. At the same time, black inflammation like rain pouring down on every place in Xiaoxiansu. Large-scale destruction began. Thousands of immortal palace pavilions, all contaminated with black inflammation, collapsed and vanished, and turned into a fluffy fly. Xiaoxiansu, which was originally the most powerful of immortal energy, turned into a dead domain at a very fast rate. At this moment, the ink of the sun lying on the top of the hibiscus tree. Seeing this situation, the heart is constantly bleeding. All his insides are burned here. "Junzun, leave me a little." In the end he could not help but say. Responding to him, it was I Ching who froze coldly. Looking at his incomparable back, Gongzimo's eyes flashed a rage and resentment, but soon returned to normal. After all, he can only rely on the truth to survive. "Wait, I will escape this disaster, and you must die without a burial ground," the sun said darkly. Only the general situation exuded by this black and black treasure phase pressed the entire Xianzhou, and no one dared to fight against it. The two great Yinxian, who carried the black Wu Jiuqing black inflammation, eventually exhausted the black inflammation, at the cost of the destruction of the black giant. I Ching's face was cold, and he reached for a finger. The dark black head behind him suddenly screamed, dragging the terrifying dark yin power, and landed from the sky dome, about to swallow the two great Yinxian. It is dark in Xiaoxiansu, and the strength is no longer quiet, but a violent tide is generated. Seeing this situation, Jian Wushuang broke up in an instant, and supreme power directly swayed the real sword behind him, and with the speed of the extreme, turned around a knee and slammed into the young guard. Due to the fluctuation of Yanli tide, all Yinxian present could not detect the danger in time. Therefore, when the youth guard responded, it was already too late, and the belly was hit hard by Jian Wushuang. Mumming sounded, he was like a falling kite. One end fell towards Xiaoxiansu. Almost at the same time, Chun Qing and Chun Qiu suddenly broke out, forcing the remaining 4 musketeers. Then Chuanqiu summoned his 8 armed eyes, and fought against several swordsmen. Brother sword, quick battle. Chen Qing pulled out the real sword around his waist and looked sharply at Jian Wushuang. We will break it for you. Sword had no double-headed head. And then he looked through the waves and waves of tide and looked at the sun ink lying on the hibiscus tree. At the next moment, he stepped on the cloud of his feet and sprinted forward. No matter the top of his head, he could destroy the battle of heaven and earth at any time. Just like the son of the startled bird, Mo immediately noticed Wushuang, who had swept towards him, and he became restless immediately. Respect the Lord to save me. Di Qing turned impatiently, and after seeing Jian Wushuang's flying body, without any hesitation, he opened his palms directly, transformed into thousands of strands of strength, and walked away. Thousands of Yanli turned into unmatched chains, bound to the sword Wushuang at an indescribable speed. The dynamism of such a realm has been able to obliterate Yanxian. Jian Wushuang only felt that the air around him was somewhat stagnation and sticky, and the chain of thousands of Yanli forces trapped him almost instantly. Strong enough to crush the bones and bones, as the chain tightened, added to his body. Seeing this, his son smiled coldly, and one of his broken arms was given by Wushuang Wuxiao. Now the enemy was in front of him. He burst out in his palm. Looking at the dense chains of diffusive force around his body, Jian Wushuang slowly closed his eyes. Then, a small galaxy composed of 7 stars appeared in his eyebrows. This is a fairy style given to Jian Wushuang from that broken stone bead. A little mountain. Boom! A long ripple of water, with him as the center, directly stirred up, belonging to a fairy style beyond the perception of Yanxian's surging. Break me! Jian Wushuang suddenly opened his eyes, the eyebrow galaxy circulated, and the general trend. Tens of strands of chains on his body shattered, and invisible and quality water dragons broke free from thee and entangled around him. In a little mountain and river, Jian Wushuang is the absolute master. Breaking through the declining power of I Ching, he confronted him for the first time. Facing each other, Jian Wushuang had no fear, and reached out and waved gently. At once a big vision appeared. The black inflammation, that was originally brought down by the Qing dynasty, was made into a dead area, and Xiaoxianzu was suddenly divided into 2 by the unknown force. Then with countless gravel waste soil, half of the little fairy state, directly bombarded to Qing. I Ching's eyes narrowed. Can one use his own strength to divide the entire Xiaoxianzu into 2? Is this the terrible strength that Yanxian can master? Half a little fairy came out. I Ching pressed down the surprise in his eyes, snorted coldly, and stretched out his palm directly, holding it away. Immediately, the entire uncontrolled Xiaoxianzu stopped strangely at the same place, and then seemed to be squeezed into a ball by an invisible big palm, and then crushed into scum powder. The robe sleeves flicked away, and the powder disappeared, but there was a half-pointed sword in the same place. It's really interesting, a little Yanxian actually had a deterrent to me. Is this an illusion? I Ching looked at the long-gone figure meaningfully, and there was no next move. Chapter 4765. He did not intend to stop Jian Wushuang anymore, but to see what he intended to do. As for the safety of Gongzi Mo, in the eyes of Di Qing, it can be almost ignored. At the same time, the 2 Dian immortals joined forces, and eventually defeated the black Wubao phase of Di Qing. The dark power of Yin had dissipated. 1 tall and 2 strong Yanxian still stood calmly, but the slightly undulating chest showed that it was not easy for them to win. Di Qing was even more amused by this. If you only have these strengths, let's go, guys who can't help themselves. And the 2 Dian immortals, who had been silent for a while, finally spoke. Now it should not be ours but you. If Zhen Wuyang knows that there is a person close to the emperor in his heavenly domain, you will definitely not survive. It is said that the grin on the original face gradually became stagnant, and a pair of black and white eyes also had a strong killing intention. You dare to threaten me? So what? As long as you continue to fight, Tianting will surely be aware of your existence. By that time, Zhen Wuyang will definitely shoot you to kill you. For the sake of a son, it is not worth it to put yourself in. Only you can never compete with the whole heavenly court. I Qingyue heard the colder his face. I hate threats the most. Since you threaten me, you must be prepared to die before me. Relax, I promise to kill you first when Zhenmiang is aware of it. At the end of the speech, I Qing stretched out his hand and provoked a long feather between the hair tips. Then, a white wubao photo that covered the sky and sun gradually emerged. Compared with the previous black and white treasures, this white-black is more tyrannical, with unparalleled beams of strong sunlight projected in its wide eyes. Chengqi, I Qingshan screamed. He did not intend to keep his hands, released the most tyrannical form, trying to suppress it directly. The big fight starts again. On the other side, Jian Wushuang got rid of Ti Qing's shackles and urged him to scold towards his son. The son Mo, who had already killed him and put him into action, saw the sword Wushuang splitting half of the Xianzhou with his own strength, and he was shocked by the shock, and he directly stopped in the air, and then reversed. The figure turned back to the hibiscus tree. Wanna go? Leave it to me. Jian Wushuang drank coldly and reached forward with a hand. The space immediately collapsed, and the ink of the sun who was flying suddenly staggered and rolled directly out. Taking advantage of this, Jian Wushuang equalized and suppressed him with a palm. The rock rising from the ground nailed him firmly under the hibiscus tree. Let me go! Gongziemo shouted in panic. I will give you whatever you want as long as you let me go. Jian Wushuang's brow furrowed, and he drew up with a straight palm to make him shut up. Then he reached into the arms of Master Mo directly. But he didn't find what he wanted. There was nothing in him's arms. There was half a piece of sky-shaped bone armor. What do I want? Jian Wushuangqiang swallowed his heart coldly. Gongzi's eyes were horrified. Which kind of thing are you looking for? It's really in my arms. I haven't discarded it. Jian Wushuang didn't look like he was talking in his eyes, and he searched again. But the result was the same as before, and the sky-shaped bone armor was still not found. You lied to me? Jian Wu's double-sided color was cold, and his raised palm burst into murderous air. The sun's ink surface is as dead as dust. He clearly remembers that after the jade bone armor was picked up by himself, he has never lost it in his arms. But how can it disappear now? Jian Wushuang did not intend to kill him. In this case, if the required things are not found, he must get out as soon as possible to avoid being affected. Just as he was about to leave an impressive lesson for his son Mo, he left a cold voice resounding from behind him. Boy, go die. Di Qing's figure appeared quietly behind Jian Wushuang. Then he extended a finger and touched the back of Jian Wushuang. Buzz! One finger with the general trend of black and white, from the back without any obstruction, blasted his entire chest. Divine blood, Yanli Xianyuan, are all broken at this moment. Jian Wushuang's pupils were placed to the greatest indescribable pain, with a blank of divine consciousness, which made him staggered, and then fell to the void. Di Qing withdrew his palms, and the color of regret was flashed away, and his back turned back again. The whole process was almost completed in one breath, and when the sun Mo reacted, Jian Wushuang's broken figure was no longer alive. I'm fine, he murmured as he sat under the hibiscus tree. The entire northern celestial state has been completely chaotic, and all the top repairs in Yanxian that have not been affected have left in the first time. And the guards who should have arrived in the first time, after seeing the terrible scene of the Dian Immortal battle, all tacitly played and disappeared. The entire northern celestial state is located in the most northern territories of Desiyu, not far from Tianting. So at this moment, what happened in the northern celestial state has not affected the rest of the sky. On the broken ground still lingering with speckled black inflammation, a broken figure lay on his back. The belly in front of him was empty, replaced by a big hole, and the fairy body was nearly broken by half. This kind of injury, in exchange for the rest of Yanxian, is already too dead to die. However, if you look closely, you can find that this figure, which should have disappeared, is full of the vigorous life that only souls have. The broken fairy body is also repairing at a speed visible to the naked eye. Immortal body, even if the source of the fairy is broken, and the strength is scattered, but as long as there is a will to survive, it is enough to reshape. In the same way, this was replaced by the rest of Yan Xian, who was supposed to have a deadly injury on Jian Wuxuang. Not even a heavy hit. His fingers moved slightly, and his blank consciousness slowly recovered. Although the immortal body is constantly recovering, the severe pain after trauma still affects him. Above the clouds, a great battle still erupted, and the magnificent martyrdom exploded. Jian Wuxuang lay on his back, expecting to recover soon. At this moment, a pair of white and tender feet tied with silver bells quietly stepped on the ground burned by flames. It seemed that the owners of these feet could not feel the heat. The luo skirt hanging on the ground was melting, exposing the bright and extremely pale skin of the calf. In the end, the master of these feet came to Jian Wuxuang and squatted slowly. At the same time, a quaint and fissured gully was placed in front of him. Chapter 4766. Jian Wuxuang's pupils condensed, and his breathing became heavy. The jade piece that caught his eyes was exactly what he had been looking for unsuccessfully. At this moment, the figure holding this bone armor is the Silver Bell Mother, who had been staying with Gongzi Mo. Jian Wuxuang reached out unconsciously to grasp, but the silver bell suddenly withdrew his palm. This thing, you need it very much? Yinling waved his bone armor, and looked at him playfully. Has returned to almost the same sword. Wuxuang, propped up from the ground, staring at her closely. This thing is not useful to me, but it seems that you need it very much, Yinling said slowly. I can give it to you, but you have to promise me a condition. Say. Jian Wuxuang frowned. Yinling nodded. The conditions are very simple. Take me out of here, and eternal life will no longer set foot here. I originally did not intend to exchange the swordsmanship of the exchange conditions. After hearing this simple news, I nodded directly. Yes, I promise you. Yinling smiled, but when he reached over, he quickly shoved the bone armor into his chest. I can't give it to you now. If you change your mind temporarily, it's me who is unlucky, Yinling said seriously. So I must leave Bai Shengxian's who completely before I can give this thing to you. Jian Wuxuang heard the words, and did not express too much. Now another piece of sky-shaped bone armor is in front of him, which greatly saves his energy. At the same time, in the face of such a simple request, you can change to a bone armor, not to mention regenerative killing. Although she may be a cumbersome or unstable factor, Jian Wuxuang has decided to take her away, reaching out the entrance of the crystal plug of the top of the Black Mountain to quickly nourish the newly recovered meridian. He said, You wait here first. I will go back and I will pick up later. Yinling shook her head directly. No, I'll go with you. The variables are too big now, but it might be safer to follow you. Jian Wuxuang was helpless, and regardless of her, he hurried to the sky. Although he wanted to restore his eyes to the truth that had hit him hard, the gap between the two was really too large. It would obviously be unwise to take revenge without consideration. Jian Wuxuang took a deep look at Tai Qing, and was ready to pick Qin Qing and Chuanqiu together. Just then, he glanced at the corner of the hibiscus tree. I saw a ghostly figure emerge quietly behind the frightened Sun Mo. Perhaps the strange breath behind him was noticed, and the sun subconsciously shifted into a subconscious form. A flash of cold light flashed through, and the majestic vigorous force directly crushed his half-body into scum powder. The screams resounded. Yunzuan, save me. But at present, Qing Qing is in a struggle with the two Dian immortals. It is already very difficult to get rid of her figure, and it is even more impossible to go to aid like before. If it weren't for his subconscious turnaround, only the sneak attack would be enough to make his body disappear. Gongzi Mo's half-body was completely broken, and he collapsed under the hibiscus tree, his face ashes. The ghost-like figure slowly came to him, holding a real sword in his hand. The ghostly figure is wearing a spooky mask, but judging from the figure, it is a woman. Obviously, it was her who caused the greatest damage to the sun. Seemingly feeling the danger of dying, Gongzi Mo calmed down from the initial panic and began to fight back. With only one arm left, he released the majestic force and slammed into the ghost's body. But at the next moment, she instantly cut out the sword and directly cut off the only arm left by Master Mo. The ghost's body did not want to talk nonsense, after severing his arm sharply, urging the majestic force to break its fairy source. Abnormal changes. That magnificent trend was suddenly cut off before touching the fairy source of Gongzi Mo, and then, together with the ghost body, was trapped by a peculiar force. It's true again. He is really terrible, just a wave of hand, can easily trap a Yanxian. The ghostly figure did not anticipate this scene, and when the reaction came, everything was too late. Di Qing grabbed and held her, apparently intending to smash its fairy source directly from the air. At this moment, Jian Wushuang's figure suddenly arrived, holding the invisible sword, and directly cut off all the connections of the ghost's body. Di Qing's eyes suddenly glared, as if he saw something incredible, and he was obviously very surprised that Jian Wushuang was still alive. But he could no longer withdraw, facing the two seemingly vulnerable, but extremely difficult Dayan immortal, and unable to exert his full strength. He could only confront this way. Because once the Qing dynasty has made a more supreme trend, his unique breath will inevitably spread throughout the northern celestial state. If Tianting is aware, his ending will only come down or die. Therefore he couldn't use his full strength at all, and could only stick together like this. Although the life and death of Master Zmo are not in the mind of Di Qing, the Enlightenment Dojo he can give and some conditions are still very rich. The true black blood veins formed by the living creatures of the heavens and the earth, no matter how the avenue flows, are the most ancient and top-notch existence. Since the practice of Qinghua's practice has been completed, 9 roots have been cultivated, and if there is one more, one can realize the emperor's luck and reach the throne. So now, he can't have any failure, even with the ink of the sun who provided him with dojo and resources. Jian Wushuang and I Ching coldly looked at each other, pulling the ghost body back without fear. The ghost body was slightly unnaturally freed slightly. After Yu reading www.ukakanshu.com was found to be in vain, he simply let him be involved. Back under the huge hibiscus tree, Jian Wushuang slowly spit out a murky breath. Waving his arm free of Jian Wushuang's palm, the ghostly figure with a mask came to Gongzi Mo. Perhaps after a series of fierce battles, the mask belt behind the ghostly body-shaped hair suddenly fell off, and then immediately fell down with a whole black gold mask. The green silk hung down, revealing a beautiful and delicate cheek with a little paleness. "It's you," Jian Wushuang blurted out subconsciously when he saw this highly recognizable cheek. "Zhang Ying." This woman with a beautiful and delicate cheek. It was Jian Wushuang's first voyage to the day when he reached Dayanhuan, and the spring and autumn of the Black Mountain Spar. Soon after he defeated the giant sea Tianzhong, and then saw it in a sea area. To the unconscious woman, and after hearing the word Zhengying, the ghost body was shocked. Obviously it was not expected that someone could call her a name in such a place. Chapter 4767. For a moment, the air fell into a state of silence. Jian Wushuang soon came to understand why Zhengying was surprised, because he has now turned into a normal guard's face, which is completely different from his previous face. It was Zhengying who didn't recognize him as the sword of Wushang on that voyage. It's just that at the moment when the two of them met again, they were so weird. This woman who disappeared quietly after the War of Wozhe Ocean. Why is it suddenly appearing in Baitian Xianzhou right now? And it seems that he is running to kill the son of the town. Is she the messenger of a certain emperor under Zhengyang? Jian Wushuang was a little uncertain, but opened his mouth slightly but said nothing, and then turned to leave. At this moment, a sudden big crisis behind him made him suddenly turn his head. Then a tangled real sword almost rubbed his neck and thrust forward, bringing a trace of blood. If it wasn't for evasion in time, this sword was enough to cause serious damage to sword warriors. After he was able to escape the crisis, he turned to look at Zhengying, his eyes watery. Zhengying's beautiful face is cold and frost at the moment, and he holds the sword in his right hand. He doesn't even say a word, and carries Yanli to kill Jian Wushuang again. "What's wrong with you?" The food caught the blade that went straight to his door in the blink of an eye. Jian Wushuang pressed his heart and angered, and came to Zhengying with such a sentence. "Really, I am a soft persimmon?" Zhengying, who was still in the stabbing state, was stiff again, and there were some doubts in her cold eyes, because she heard something familiar from the young guard in front of her. But at the next moment, a more chilling murderous intention broke out. From behind Zheng Ying, there were suddenly hundreds of magnificent vigors, all of which were suppressed to Jian Wushuang. Rao thought about his old feelings again, and Jian Wushuang also raised his anger. He suddenly slammed the front with his palms, and fought against those forces. A small burst of martyrdom stirred up under the hibiscus tree. At the same time, Jian Wushuang pointed out again, turned into several Yanli water dragons trapped to Zheng Ying. He didn't want to put Zheng Ying to death. After all, he was one of the few people he saw when he first came to Dianhuan, so he only aimed to trap her. But the more this is, the more fierce Zheng Ying's resistance is, exceeding the general strength of Yin Xian, which makes Jian Wushuang also a headache. What are you going to do? Don't go too far, Zheng Ying. Jian Wushuang looked at the woman in front of her, and said in a deep voice. Zheng Ying, who had been silent for a long time, finally spoke. How do you know my name? Jian Wushuang was silent when he heard the words. Only then did he realize that he could not reveal any information about himself at all. At the end, he emptied and pushed Zheng Ying away. Don't care who I am, I advise you, Sun Zimo is better not to kill. After leaving this sentence, Jian Wushuang apparently didn't want to get entangled anymore, and just walked away. Looking at the somewhat familiar back, Zheng Ying did not catch up, but turned to look at the prince's ink lying under the hibiscus tree. After several fights and escapes, Gongzi Mo has already opened his eyes, leaving only his eyes unwilling. Under the cooperation of Diqing and Dianxian, the entire Xiaoxianzu, and even the North Tiangxianzu, are on the verge of collapse. The old root of Panshan in the hibiscus tree has broken, and the gravel is falling. Zheng Ying stepped forward, facing the setting sun of the sun. Without any hesitation, a sword cut off the head of the Sun Mo. Then, she stretched out her palm again, releasing the majestic force, and crushing his fairy source easily. At this point, Zhen Wuyang seated the fifth Emperor Sun Ink under the hibiscus tree. The northern Tiangxianzu, which was supported by Gongzi Modi's Qiyin, began to collapse, and all avenues in Qiyin began to be disordered. Heaven and earth mourn. This is the reaction of the death of the emperor. And Zheng Ying, the terminator of everything, looked at the dead head in his hand, and waved his hand to intercept the last luck of his son, Mo, who belonged to the emperor. In the end, the head turned into a cup of powder, and fell under the hibiscus tree. The emperor passed away, and the avenue of heaven and earth shuddered. At this moment, Yin Xian, or Dianxian, who fought in the northern Tiangxianzu, noticed. Jian Wushuang turned around, and looked at the end with a complicated look. The figure standing under the hibiscus tree, then left quickly. In the end, Gongzi Mo died, and any Yin Xian or Dianxian present would definitely be thoroughly investigated by heaven. If any clues are left, it will surely be a disaster. Jian Wushuang will never forget that apart from the true Wuyang who is Emperor's luck, there are 99 Dian immortals in the entire heavenly court. Any one of them has the absolute power to play against the Qing dynasty alone. So right now escaping quickly is the most correct choice. Chen Qing and Chuanxiu, who are fighting desperately, only feel that they are all loose. The mysterious 5 swordsmen stopped the offensive, and they all screamed at the sky dome. The son of ink is dead, withdraw. The 2 blood-stained Dian immortals heard the words, and gave up the confrontation with Di Qing directly, preparing to escape. Wanna run? Leave it to me. Di Qing screamed angrily, his arms shook, and they grabbed them. The 2 great Yin Xian, hurriedly running Yanli's general resistance, and at the same time he said with a deep voice, Young Master Mo is dead. Heavenly Court will inevitably pursue it. And now he will not go again. You can't walk away if you want to go. Yi Qingqing smiled. There is so much time. I will kill you first, and it will not be too late. No brain idiot. Since they couldn't get away, the 2 Dian immortals were also anxious. At this node, staying here for one more point, the more unlikely it is to escape. But Diqing did not allow them to leave, and once again struggled. Spring and autumn, Qingqing, let's go. With a deep voice, Jian Wushuang's body was like electricity, carrying the general trend. directly opening the blockade of the 5 swordsmen and giving aid to the 2. Chun Qing and Chuanxiu nodded, and the 3 escaped together. Brother Sword the Sun Imo really died? During the escape, Chun Qing couldn't help asking. He still couldn't believe it. The 5th emperor under Zemyang just died like this? Jian Wushuang nodded slightly. The luck has gone, and there is no chance of survival by chance. Chun Qing nodded, not knowing whether it was joy or worry in his eyes. Damn it, playing so hurriedly. I actually forgot to sprinkle hot urine on the Temple of Heaven. Don't think about it, run away from here first. The northern celestial state is vast, but with the dispersal of the Emperor's luck, the avenue is extremely disordered, and the entire celestial state is irreversibly broken. And Jian Wushuang is to run away from Xianzhou with all his strength before Tianting comes, and hide the breath as much as possible. The chaotic situation right now is exactly what he wants. As long as he leaves Xianzhou, even if the Emperor comes in person, he will never be aware that he has been there. Chapter 4768. Under the hibiscus tree. Zheng Ying glanced back. The figure that had gone away. She seemed a bit enlightened. After counting interest, her figure disappeared quietly when the hibiscus tree completely collapsed. Brother Sword, at most within half a day, we can leave the Xianzhou. Have you found what you need? Chun Qing asked. Jian Wushuang didn't open his mouth, but looked at Yin Ling, who was right next to him. You can rest assured that as long as you are out of this northern celestial state, you will get what you want immediately. Yin Ling patted the chest that had peaks and smiled proudly. Without a double-sided color, the sword turned his head to the side. Seeing this scene, both Chun Qing and Chun Xiu looked a little strange. Isn't this lady the woman of the son-in-law? Chun Qing looked a little stunned again. Yin Ling heard the words. Cheong No snorted. Hey, that stupid big one. Which one of your eyes saw me as a son of ink? I was just him imprisoned by him. Now that he is dead, I am free. Chun Qing pouted, and didn't say much. for completely hidden figures are leaving quickly. But in the next moment, Jian Wushuang felt a big crisis. Seemingly to confirm his thoughts, the northern celestial state, which had been trapped in the red and dark, began to be illuminated by a white gold awning. Then, just as Jian Wushuang and others were about to step out of the northern celestial state in one step, a barrier with invisible haze appeared outside the northern celestial state. Well, Jian Wushuang's heart sank fiercely, and a chilling impression swept through. Chen Qing and others saw the situation, and the mood also sank to the bottom. The whole broken north celestial state was blocked by external forces, and those who can block Bai Shengxian's with such a general trend, except for that kind of existence, even Dianxian can't do it. Jian Wushuang's eyes revealed a dignity and bitterness. Brother Sword, what should I do? Do I have to rush out? Chen Qingning said with a sharp voice. Jian Wushuang shook his head. From now on we can't use our strength. This barrier is definitely not something we can break through and watch its changes. After he finished speaking, he took the three men directly to a broken Xianfu pavilion, converging all his breath. On the broken sky dome, hundreds of millions of white gold mansions began to bloom and empty against the clouds. At the same time, there are tens of old men carrying all kinds of light wheels coming from the clouds. The original Qing, who was still fighting on the sky dome, also noticed this scene. Damn idiot, wait to die. One of the great Yin Xian, who fought against Qingqing, exasperated and wanted to tear away Qingqing. Di Qing withdrew his palms and looked at the old men standing in the clouds, and there was a big fear in his eyes. The two great Yin Xian glanced at each other, and their backs flew from left to right. Evil creature. One of the old men carrying the dark black will lifted his palms, showing a tendency to cover the pressure. Even if they were separated by millions of stars, they still directly captured and escaped Dian Immortal. At the same time, there was another old man carrying a red light wheel, took a slab-sized porcelain bottle from his arms, and directly ingested another Dian Immortal. But in the blink of an eye, the two escaped Dian Immortals were all caught. Afterwards, the old man carrying the black light wheel used his magical power to squeeze the two Dian Immortals into the size of a projectile. 5 suns, are you buried in the hands of air? Hong Zongdala's magnificent sound was heard through Xianzhou. The two great Yin Xian who had never been able to live forever were all frightened at the moment, because they saw that there was an ordinary old man in black robe, walking slowly. This old man is Yu Bo, the most mysterious elder behind Jin Wuyang. It has nothing to do with us. We just passed by here. The 5 sons were not killed by us, but someone else. They still wanted to say something, but the old man in black robe just flicked their hands at them, and then let their spirits disappear, and the immortals disappeared. What terrible strength is this, destroying Dian Immortal? And even the power of Yen has not been released. On the cheeks full of ravines, it seemed as though he had done all the secrets of the vicissitudes of the world. Eventually he looked at the muddy eyes, not far away. I Ching slowly stepped back half a step and stared at him. 5 sons, do you bury your hands? The hoarse voice sounded, and Yu Bo's eyes were calm to horror, as if time had stalled. Proud to be as clear as the meaning, they have to bow their heads at this moment. No, it is not possible to be buried in my hands, but in the hands of their associates. There was a woman who cut down the hair of his son Mo, and destroyed his fairy source. Di Qing pointed his finger to a distant place. 5 musketeers, Shen said. Yu Bo looked pale. He slowly stretched out his palm from the sleeve of his robe, and slowly grasped in the void. Along with his grasp, the northern Tiangxianzu, which was on the verge of breaking, accelerated the breakage. Whether it was the Xianfu pavilion or the thousands of creatures, it was inevitable that it turned into nothing. In this case, all of you will be buried with the 5 sons. Gu Ji's old voice resounded. Yu Bo's voice is like an avenue, making the entire northern celestial state irreversible. Di Qing's pupils suddenly froze. He stepped back a few steps. What do you mean? You have clearly told you the real murderer. Why don't you let me go? The death of the 5 sons is inseparable from the entire northern celestial state, and naturally you all have to be buried together. Yu Bo's voice was indifferent and unquestionable. Di Qing's complexion was blue. Do you think you'll take care of me like this? If I leave, no one can stop me. At the end of the speech, a huge golden treasure was revealed behind Di Qing, and his entire body was filled with a faint prestige. Facing more than 10 Dian immortals carrying light wheels and unpredictable Yubo, he chose a battle. But the battle hadn't even started yet. Yubo reached out his hand and pointed a black light through the void, tearing away the golden and precious treasures of the Qing dynasty and smashing his fairy source. Dead silence, extreme dead silence. It's impossible for a lifetime. So arrogant that the essence of one enemy is two, and his fairy source is so broken. The breakdown of Xianyuan is irreversible injury, which symbolizes the final death sentence of Yin Xian. Di Qing died in this way. Thousands of Huayu stripped from his body, scattered in the void. Then his figure was planted into the broken Xianzhou. After one finger extermination, Yubo raised his arms again, and the entire northern celestial state, under his control, was completely crushed into powder. Even if it is Yin Xian, they will never survive. With the death of the 5 emperors and the son of Mo, the entire trillion creatures in Xianzhou were buried with him. There is no one who can repair Yu Yan and escape from the road of Yubo. But perhaps, everything should have exceptions. Chapter 4769. With the entire North Celestial State completely crushed into powder, trillions of creatures were buried with each other. Yubo returned to heaven with the elders. Come in a hurry, go in a hurry. Everything seemed to be erased, and it never seemed to exist. The thick powder was swallowed and absorbed by the wind in the world. The heavens originally belonging to the Northern Celestial State were erased and replaced by nothingness. Perhaps it will take millions of reincarnations of the galaxy, but it wasn't until the figures riding on Huangsha got closer in the star-studded world, the white-faced man finally waved his hand unwillingly. Auras. Brothers, let's be developed when now. He was about to retreat, who has ever seen such a crystal with such a strong and pure power? 1,000 pieces of Montenegrin crystals than before he hurried away. Hundreds of times. It's really ugly. Unexpectedly, this group of miscellaneous people dare to find food in our realm. Are not shit. It's really awkward. We can find such treasures by our brothers. So we should be developed. Figures gradually emerged. How come there are legs? At the forefront of these figures, sand that covered a young man dressed in casual clothes. There were more than 50 men in thick and long suits. Looking at those fast-moving figures, swallowing saliva snorted at the ground disdainfully, as high as the hill. Brothers, move to me quickly. Men's cultivation practices are actually not weak. To hang for 10 days. All of them are ancestor-level cultivation. The wandering young man's face was mixed. At this time, and with his waved closest to the black spar, all the 110 men behind him fluttered thinking on the spar piled up on the hill, stretched out their hands directly, began to carry it. A black spar was photographed with a wave of hand, spar, and the young masters of those legs finally appeared. It's really good. This is a man. This is all for the elder sister. The bearded man could not help chanting after seeing the figure clearly. There are a few people under these crystals. Haven't you seen a man? One of the white-faced men glared at him angrily. Then dragged his eyes on the unconscious man under the crystals and took a breath, or buried in the yellow sand. The man, a total of 6 bodies in the 5 men and 1 woman, had all his upper body was called the leader of Chui Tong, revealing a comatose woman. He couldn't help but shine. His naked skin was extremely red. as if soaked in blood, his soft posture. And on his chest, Chui Tongling, there was a flaming phoenix that seemed to be able to break free from the and rush to the sky. The middle-aged man beside the falling youth pulled him at the right time, mysterious man, and reminded quietly, "A big crisis emerged in the heart of the white-faced man. This commander just wants to find out if they are acting several times to prevent unnecessary situations. This man is definitely a terrifying existence." The middle-aged man's palm and stepped forward. The Nahua man shouted again. From this perspective, he also saw some clues. Black spar. At present, boss, what should we do? 5 men and a woman, the man who also saw some clues and asked extremely traumatized. Also saw a bit of fierceness in his eyes. Especially a tall man is not middle-aged man in a broken black jean eyes. The whole chest while they are all in a coma. Kill them on the spot. And from the perspective of these people's all the top preparers ordered their lives and rushed dignity and prestige. And manipulated their respective strengths is that he can't see the strength of these people. But at this moment, where do these suspicious guys come from? Suddenly resounded, and why can it give me a sense of deterrence? Strong and powerful forces rubbed his chin in the palm, turned into a dense net. Lord Chui, the men of the white-faced man hadn't reacted yet. The middle-aged man reminded in due course. More than a dozen Dingxia were strangled by the force of falling from the sky. And waved his hand. The guys from Sand Devil's Cave are here. As long as he is found by us, Luahu shouted in exclamation. They all bring me into the city, to the white-faced man, and don't let me drop a hair. He was penetrated by Yanli from the sky. The vast yellow sand became the only main color. The manic sandstorm due to too much shaking and bumps. He was forced by a horrible wind his eyes from the with pain. Hundreds of lazy forms, a wisp of pure red light far and near, deep in the pupil of the eye. Withdraw quickly, and the stars between the eyebrows began to flow slowly. The white-faced man slightly jumped in the corner of his eyes, obviously not reconciled. This black spar, Chapter 47, which is far more precious than Tianjing, however, the converging force of yen only existed for a moment. It was already a thing in his pocket, and then dispersed completely, and now he is giving it away. Pain comes from the overwhelming pain above the consciousness. Whether it is a consciousness, or a source of immortals, or an immortal body, it was destroyed in the fall of the northern celestial state. In the final destruction process, with his own fairy body, he absorbed more than half the breath of destruction, protecting Chunqing, Chuanxiu and Yinling, so that Jian Wushuang was almost crushed by the general trend. If there is no blood of the ancestor Feng Feng in Feng Qi's body, Rao is a trait of super-perfect chaotic creatures. Although he will not let Jian Wushuang fall, he is enough to let him fall into a long sleep. Feeling that the blood of the ancestor and phoenix in the body gradually dimmed, he knew that at least one more time, the blood of Feng Qi left in his body would disappear completely. Today's swords are unparalleled. Except for their eyes turning, all other parts are in an uncontrolled state of chaos. He forbeared the pain of being shattered and split, and the fusion, looking at the whole body and the front. In the wind and sand, this team of hundreds of people is moving forward slowly. I don't know where to go. He wanted to leave, but found that he was tied into a dumpling by a unique chain, lying on the hill-like black mountain crystals, and could not move at all. Chunqing, Chuanxiu and others around Jianwushuang, without exception, were all wrapped in dumplings, and were still in a coma, ignorant of where they were. Jian Wushuang wanted to struggle to get up, but the pain from each cell caused him to persevere for a moment before finally passing out. As he closed his eyes saw that in the misty yellow sand, a black giant gate appeared. Ah! A slight moan sounded, and then Jian Wushuang woke up from the initial coma. False Khan gushed out from his temples, although it has recovered, but at most it has recovered by 10%, and even the weak dynamism can only be forced to move. This was the heaviest injury since he came to Dayanhuan, and almost the immortal body was almost broken. As a result, Jian Wushuang realized Yuba's terrible strength. What a terrible existence he would have destroyed 2 great Yinxian with a wave of his hand, and shattered the Qingxian source with 1 finger. Is he the supreme power of the same level as the Emperor Zhenliang? There is no answer. What Jian Wushuang can think of is that they escaped from the dead and escaped from Yubo. The cause of death of Gongzi Mo will be completely buried. At least they will not be thoroughly investigated. Slowly spitting out a sigh of breath, Jian Wushuang only realized that his situation was not optimistic at the moment, and he could even describe it as bad. Because the sword at this time was unparalleled, trapped by a rope, and hung high on a wall. Not only him, the sleeping Chunqing, Chuanxiu and others were all lined up beside him, hanging on the wall without exception. The city wall was made up of something, and on the dark wall, a thick bone spur was exposed abruptly, and it looked extremely ugly. And looking at this side of the sky dome, the red clouds condensed by resentment and blood almost condensed into substance. How much killing is this created to have such a vision? Jian Wuxuang has a terrible headache. Since entering this great Yanhuan, he is almost always in a passive situation. Only then left a life from the northern celestial state, and now it is so end. Since the damage had not yet been recovered, he couldn't even move freely, so he had no choice but to hang the rope on his body. Afterwards, Jian Wuxuang turned his gaze to his side. Although Chen Qing, Chen Xiu and others were all traumatized to varying degrees, they were far from fatal, and the breath tended to be stable. When he looked to the right, he was shocked. That was killed by Yu Bo on the spot, smashing the essence of Xian Yuan. At the moment, he was hanged by Jian Wuxuang's side with the same posture. Although the breath was slightly inaudible, he was actually alive. It's not good news that Tai Qing didn't die, and it was a big threat to him. Jian Wuxuang is already thinking about it. Not only Di Qing, but also a figure wearing a broken armor, also hung on the city wall. Jian Wuxuang looked at the reel, and immediately noticed that the figure in the broken armor was the young guard who had held him before, one of the 7 swordsmen. Among these figures, only the most important one is missing, the silver bell with the sky-shaped bone armor. Even at the last moment of the destruction of Xianzhou, Jian Wuxuang also took into account the existence of Yin Ling, and protected her never fell. Now that she is alone, there is only one possibility, that he will be taken away by the people in this evil city. At this moment, Chen Qing and Chuanxia woke up wandering around, and looked around dizzily speechless. Where is this? Have we escaped from the northern celestial state? Chen Qing fainted, and then saw Jian Wuxuang beside him. His eyes lit up. Brother Sword, are we dead? Of course not dead. Chuanxia was extremely weak, but not far from death. It's good to escape. We are all living together this time. Wait, is our location a bit weird now? Who the did we hang us on the city wall? Chen Qing was shocked and twisted his body to get rid of the shackles, but found that he couldn't even make a little effort out. Jian Wuxuang said in a timely manner, "Don't waste your energy, recover well, and want to come to those who caught us, and will come out soon." As his words fell, the dusty city gate opened slowly, and a faint smell flew out. Jian Wuxuang couldn't help but frown slightly. It seemed that the Feng Tianyu was exactly the same as he had guessed, with a killing intention. As the city gate slowly opened, a team of 8 came out. In the center of the team, 4 people carried a soft bed. Above the soft bed, there was a young boy with disheveled clothes and a loose figure. Needless to say, it must be us who are tied together. Chen Qing looked iron, and wished to bleed them on the spot. And Chuanxiu also changed his face and whispered in a low voice, "No, the abstinence is gone." Neiji was given to him by himself when Jian Wuxuang and others left the 6-day realm. The storage of the top crystal in Montenegro almost reached the point of terror. The top crystal inside is enough to let the top strength strongmen in one side of the sky fall into the fight for fighting. The loss right now is an inestimable loss. It must have been taken away by the gang who trapped us. If I waited for Lao Tzu to recover, he would shoot them to death. Chen Qing's teeth creaked, but he was hit hard, and he might face an ancestor. There is no backhand in top repair. You're tuning in to the Li Mei's Wuxia Whispers YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.